I call this special meeting of the Board of Directors of the Joshua Basin Water District to order. Today is March 19th, 2026, and the time is 9 a.m. Let's begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. General Manager Johnson, please conduct the roll call and confirm a quorum.
President Doolittle.
Here.
Director Klein.
President.
Director Fick.
Here.
Director Jarlsberg.
Here.
Vice President Schultz.
Here.
Board members, are there any changes requested to the agenda?
Keep it short.
Okay, limit your questions. All right. Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
I'll make the motion.
Second? Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. We will now open public comment. We have this time set aside for public comment on any district-related matter, whether appearing on the agenda or not. We welcome public comment. Please understand that due to the Brown Act, the board is prohibited from taking action on items not listed on the agenda. But if appropriate, the matter may be considered for a future agenda. Also, comments should be limited to matters within the jurisdiction of the Water District. The board cannot respond to items outside of its authority. At board president's discretion, I may ask that your comments on a particular item on the agenda be deferred until that item is heard later in our meeting. Please state your name and limit your comments to 3 minutes. For members of the public attending online, we cannot see you right easily, and so please use the raised hand reaction feature in your toolbar on Zoom to signal your desire to comment and be recognized by the board. Any comments? Please come to the lectern. Oh, yeah. Is that right? With the audio? Okay. Be recognized? Yeah.
There's no mic.
I know, I saw that.
That's fine.
It's fine. I figured it was fine.
I'm deaf.
You'll have, if we can ask that you speak up because of our miking system, please. Okay.
My name is Garrett Carlson, I'm a landscape architect. This is landscape architect for over 50 years. My graduate work is in architecture. I discovered Joshua Tree about 20 years ago, and it was kind of an escape for me coming out of LA just to kind of decompress a little. Anyway, I bought this series of lots 20 years ago, and I wanted to do a series of unusual houses, kind of fun, I don't know, experimental stuff. And so 20 years ago, 2008, my house, which is the older house, which I have a copy of, one of the first things I did was I went to the water board and I asked, do you have any problems with water? And they said, no, we have tons of water. Give it your best shot, go for it. And so I did. I'm wild and crazy. So my first house was sort of over the top. It was on HGTV, Extreme Homes. It was written up on a bunch of magazines, but it was an experimental house. So my house was small house, 1,700 square feet. It had 18 inches of soil on the roof, which amounted to about 250,000 pounds. So the weight load was pretty interesting. It had half of the house was covered in artificial rock on the west side, so it cooled it off. I had double concrete floors, air conditioning, heating in the floors. I planted a lot of trees just around the house to encompass it. My water bills at that time, 2008, 2010, were about $1,000 a year. My water bill last year was $10,000. Since my first house, I've done 2 more. The Horizon House, number 2, and the one I just finished, my floating house, number 3. So they're 3-acre properties, some a little bit bigger. I obviously believe that the landscaping is very important, and the landscaping and the architecture go hand in hand. So I am concerned. LA kind of came up with the same thing about 20 years ago. They changed their rates around so the tiers went up and you paid more money, where in the old days it was the more you used, the less you paid. What happened was people started cutting their trees down. They started scraping the lots. The face of LA changed. Everybody started cementing in their gardens. Now, 20 years later, they're lowering the waterways. They're encouraging people to take out 20% of their concrete and add more landscape. So my first water meter was a couple $1,000. And my second house, the Horizon House, 2015, it was 5,000 to 6,000. My floating house, number 3, which was 2022, was 16,000. I just got a price for my number 4 house. I have 2 more to go if I live so long. The next one is a warehouse. The final one would be an underground house. But I just got a quote, $24,000. So what's interesting is that back in 2008, I paid $50,000 to bring underground water and power down my street, which is a dirt street. So I paid for your infrastructure, but now you are billing me $24,000 for a water meter that costs $350 that can be put in less than a day. Does this seem odd to you? Because it seems odd to me. Anyway, I'm not a happy camper. And I have a feeling there are a few other people in the community as well. But 5 to 10 years down the road, the way things are going, it's going to change the face of Joshua Tree. And I love Joshua Tree kind of the way it is. I hate to see it come in LA in architectural waste. So anyway, I put it all in writing as well. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Carlson. Are there any more comments? Any comments online? All right, hearing none, the public comment period is closed. We'll now move to agenda item 5, which is the consent calendar. Consent calendar items are expected to be routine and non-controversial, to be acted upon the board at one time without discussion. If a board member would like an item to be handled separately, we'll remove it from the consent calendar for separate action. Looking at board members. All right. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar containing draft minutes from March 4th, 2026?
I'll make the motion.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
No opposed, the motion carries. Next is item 7A, workshop. Today, we're holding a workshop to talk through chromium-6 treatment options for JBWD and related funding. As this is a workshop, we'll all here will be discussing this topic in depth and asking questions, but the board will not be taking any formal action. We are delighted to have any members of the public attending. We ask that you, along with our board members, take note of your questions, including the slide number, and we will address these at the conclusion of each presentation. Those of you online, please use the hand raise option and we will get to you as well. The recommended action for this workshop is for the board to discuss chromium-6 treatment and funding and provide direction. So this is divided into 2 parts, and the first part is hexavalent chromium, also known as chromium-6 treatment project. We have a few presenters on this. JBWD General Manager Sarah Johnson will be handling the introductions.
Glad to have all of us here to talk about chromium-6 and funding. This is not a new topic to us. Today we'll get a little bit more in depth what we've learned and where we think we're going. To begin with, we are going to introduce our U.S. Water Alliance team. They have been working on some public engagement and outreach materials that you can probably see sitting here behind us. And I'll get started by introducing Austin Thompson Spain, and she will introduce her team. Take it away, Austin.
Great. Thank you so much, Sarah. Hi, everyone. It's really great to see all of you. I am going to share my screen really quickly. Let me send a request for that so that y'all can see the presentation that I have. And then I do have a slide with some names of other folks on my team, and we'll go through that in just a moment. All right. Hopefully you can see my screen now. Thank you so much for giving me presentation functionality. So as Sarah mentioned, we are going to talk a little bit about some of the public outreach assistance that we've been providing to the district. So let's go ahead and get started. So just to provide a little agenda of what we're going to be going through today, my goal is to keep this short. I know y'all have a robust agenda. My goal is to spend about 15 minutes, and these are some of the things that we'll cover in that 15 minutes. So we'll start by doing introductions. Then after that, we'll talk a little bit about the assistance that we've provided to the district to date. And then after we've reviewed the assistance that we've already provided, we'll talk a little bit about the current work that we've been supporting with. specifically the development of frequently asked questions related to Chromium-6, as well as a public-facing flyer and poster. So just to start off with some introductions, as Sarah mentioned, my name's Austin Thompson Spain. I'm a senior program manager with the U.S. Water Alliance. The U.S. Water Alliance is a national nonprofit, and as part of being a national nonprofit, we provide technical assistance to water and wastewater systems across the country, and we have a grant through US EPA to do that work. I've been with the Alliance for just under 2 years, I guess, at this point. But I've been doing technical assistance for about 8 years. Before I was with the U.S. Water Alliance, I was a technical assistance provider through a similar organization at UNC Chapel Hill. And I am based in Raleigh, North Carolina. And I will pass it over to my colleague, Carrie, to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name's Carrie. I'm a program manager with the U.S. Water Alliance, and I've been here providing technical assistance for almost 3 years now. I have a background in water resources engineering and am really interested and excited to talk with you all about these Chromium-6 public information materials today. I apologize, I don't have my camera on. I'm out in the field today, but hopefully you can still hear me all right. Thanks so much, and I'll pass it to Kathleen.
Yes, thank you so much, Carrie and Austin. Yeah, my name is Kathleen Hoyler. I'm a PhD candidate at Virginia Tech, where I've also been working as part of the U.S. Water Alliance team since about August. I've really enjoyed my work there, and my research at Virginia Tech is mostly focused on emerging contaminants as it relates to groundwater and drinking water quality. So this Chromium-6 stuff has been very interesting to work on. So I look forward to taking your questions. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, y'all. All right, we will keep moving. So as I mentioned, wanted to start by just refreshing on some of the assistance that we've provided to date. So we did a presentation to the board, gosh, it might have been about 2 years ago now, to talk about some of the work that we were aiming to complete, but have now completed. And these are all listed over here to the left. So we have provided some financial technical assistance, and then some outreach related assistance thus far. On the financial side, we conducted a financial health assessment for the district, looked at different grant requirements that the district might be eligible for, put together an inventory of funding and financing sources for various capital needs for the district. We worked with Jacobs Engineering and West Coast Civil and used our EPA grant to fund the Chromium-6 alternatives analysis. And then we also visited the district in September of 2024, got to tour the infrastructure, meet the staff, meet some of the board members, and also basically table at the farmers market. So we did kind of like a co-tabling event at one of the Saturday farmers markets. And since the conclusion of that work, we were kind of always planning to jump back in on some of the public outreach, and recently have re-engaged with the district on that. And so those are the two things that I'm really going to be focused on today, is talking about the development of those frequently asked questions for the website, as well as a flyer and poster that are really designed to be more visually appealing and public facing, that could be used to hand out to the public or to put on display at the farmers market for district tours and things of that nature. So just to kind of provide a brief overview of the different materials that we've been working on, as well as the associated goals. The first one is the FAQs, and the goal there was really to provide the district with a comprehensive list of questions and corresponding answers that y'all might hear from the public, right? So what are some of the things that other districts within California are putting into FAQs, that the State Water Resources Control Board has put into FAQs, or that district staff are already hearing? So this is really designed to be, just a Word doc that is extensive and comprehensive, so that if customers come to the district with a specific question, district staff have something that they can point them to, or something that they can reference when answering that question. From there, we developed a flyer and poster, and the goal with the flyer and poster was for it to be more high level, right? Not necessarily quite as comprehensive, but easy for the public to understand, visually appealing, and also point folks to the district website if they wanted to learn more information, if they wanted to see the FAQs, to see some of the other information that y'all share on your website. And then as we were developing the FAQs and the flyer and poster with the district, we kind of had these conversations about some of these components of Chromium-6 regulations that are just like hard to conceptualize, right? Like if you don't interact with this sort of information on a regular basis, it might be hard to visualize or really understand it. And so we also wanted to create a couple of graphics that the district could use to basically just visually depict some of these concepts that might be a little unfamiliar or hard to understand. And I'll provide examples of all of this in the forthcoming slides. So just to start, with the FAQs, as I mentioned, we worked really closely with the district staff to develop these and really develop them based on questions that have already been heard or that y'all expect to hear, and really kind of grouped these into 3 categories. So the first one being background information, the second one focusing on the district's response to date, and the third one being focused on the plan going forward. And in the interest of time, this presentation is just going to list the questions that we identified in those FAQs. But I do believe, and David and Sarah, y'all can jump in and correct me if I'm wrong. But the full PDF of FAQs is up on the website and could be referenced by the board if they wanted to dive in and see the answers to those questions. So I'll pause there. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Excellent. Okay. So let's dive into some of these questions. All right, so starting with, as I mentioned, this kind of overarching category of background questions, we wanted to start the FAQs document by just acknowledging that customers have been receiving notices related to chromium-6 in their water bills, right? So that might be, how they are learning about chromium-6 and how they're really starting to be aware of changes to state regulations. So we wanted to start there with our questions because that might be what's bringing people to this document. After addressing that, we wanted to start really wide, right? We want to help people understand what is chromium, where does it come from, who regulates it? And then as we were starting to dive into some of these more technical questions, we realized we were using jargon, things that would come up in resources from the State Water Resources Control Board, but again, might not be language that folks use in general conversation. So anytime we introduced a new concept, we tried to follow it up with another question that really defined what that concept was. So for example, as we were talking about who regulates chromium-6, we started talking about maximum contaminant levels. And so we wanted to make sure that we had a question related to that. From there, we wanted to talk about how the chromium regulations have changed, how recognizing that there are 2 MCLs for chromium, US EPA's and the state of California's, which of those the district has to meet. We wanted to explain some of the concepts related to MCLs like parts per billion, how these contaminants are measured, and how that actually is measured right in the field. Wanted to explain why California's chromium MCL is so much lower than EPA's, and then also explain a little bit as to why these regulations changed in the first place. So you can see we're kind of narrowing the questions, right, to get more specific to what customers within the district might be experiencing. Within the question of why the chromium-6 regulations changed in California, we introduced this concept of a public health goal. So we provided a question explaining what that was. And then after that, we started to get into some of the questions that customers may have, which is, if my drinking water has chromium-6, is it safe to drink? We wanted to recognize that some folks within the district, in addition to being customers, might also have a groundwater well on their property. So wanted to make sure we acknowledge the fact that there are folks within the service area that fall into that category and may have questions about their groundwater well. And then we also wanted to make sure we acknowledged and provided information on the fact that these regulations affect water districts across the state. So it is not just Joshua Basin Water District that is having to respond to this, right? There are many other water districts, many other customers across the state that are having to respond. From there, we move into questions related to the district response. So first talking about test results, right? And the fact that the district is testing for chromium-6. Wanted to make sure we acknowledge that the district is not out of compliance with state regulations. And then also wanted to provide a pretty succinct, to the extent that we can, but comprehensive list of actions that the district has already taken to respond to these changes in chromium-6 regulations, because y'all have done a lot to try to get out ahead of this, and we want to make sure that that was included in these questions. And finally, the last category was focused on the district's plan. So making sure customers understand that the district has to comply with these state regulations, but also leaving some space to talk about what the district's plan is going forward. And so this is the extent of the questions that we put together thus far. Our hope is that this can be a living document that continues to be updated if things change, if actions that are in the part of the plan going forward are completed, right? These different questions can be updated and it can continue to be an up-to-date resource for the customers. The next thing we worked on was that flyer and poster. So we worked with a creative consultant as well as staff within the district to develop that flyer and poster. And I'll show them on the next 2 slides, but just for your reference, they share the same copy and they are based on the FAQs that I just mentioned, as well as the district's Chromium 6 talking points. But they are designed to be easy to understand at a high level and really just provide customers with some basic information, but then direct them to the website if they want to learn more. So the goal isn't necessarily to be comprehensive or to overwhelm folks, but just introduce the concept in a visually appealing and friendly way. So this is the flyer. So it's a front and back flyer. It's 2 pages. And really it follows kind of a similar structure to FAQs with this sort of question and answer format. But we tried to, use bullets, keep things succinct, use bolding, try to incorporate things that we know will draw the eye of the public to important information. So we start off with describing what we're talking about. And then towards the end here in this last bullet, we introduce this concept of a part per billion. At the beginning of this presentation, I talked about how some of these concepts are difficult to visualize, right, if you don't have any exposure to them. So we worked with our creative consultant to develop a graphic that helps folks understand what a part per billion might look like, right? Just really trying to emphasize just how tiny this is. So using the one of the, I think, analogies that is used a lot is that a part per billion is equivalent to 1 drop of water in an Olympic-sized swimming pool, but also incorporating another one, which is that it's also equivalent to a pinch of salt and a ton of potato chips, right? So just really trying to help folks understand just how small we're talking about when we're talking about a part per billion. From there, we've got the sort of what is going on that provides folks with kind of a general update on what's changed over time. And in this section, we talk a little bit about the MCLs at the federal and state level. So we wanted to provide this bar chart that helps folks understand where the average Chromium 6 levels for the district fall relative to the old Chromium 6 standards, the new Chromium 6 standards, and US EPA's total Chromium standard. So again, just kind of helping people wrap their mind around what we're talking about in terms of the levels in the district versus the changes in the regulations. And then finally, we just wanted to make sure that folks understood that this is not an emergency. They don't need to use bottled water. And if they have any questions, they can reach out to the district either by phone or by email. And then finally, as I mentioned, really using the opportunity to point people to the website, which is kind of the central resource for all the information related to Chromium 6. And the last thing I'll mention here is just that we did, at the direction of staff from the district, add when this specific flyer was created so that if it is updated over time, this can be updated as well so that, if a customer comes in with this flyer, something's changed, you can obviously point them to the most up-to-date version of it if for some reason they're coming in with something that's outdated. And then what you can see here, this is just the poster version. All the information is the same as what was presented on the flyer. But this was really designed to be something that could be at the farmer's market, could be at the district tours. It's not necessarily something that people take home with them, but could be, the start of a conversation. If people had very specific questions around Chromium 6, it could be, a good opportunity to point to something on this poster and have a conversation about it. So with that, I know I went through that quickly, but I wanted to make sure I stuck to the 15 minutes. So that's all I have in terms of presentation material. I think at this point, if y'all have any specific questions, we can do our best to answer those. But thank you so much for your time and for having us today. And I'll stop sharing for now.
Now that we've heard from the U.S. Water Alliance's Ms. Spain, and hello, nice to see you again, Austin.
Hello.
Are there any questions from the public? Please remember to limit your comments to 3 minutes. online? Thank you. Public comment period is now closed and we are on to board deliberation. Who would like to speak first? Okay, I'll go first. How about that? So I was, one of the things I wanted to come out of this is this workshop was I wanted to discuss the health hazards. And I appreciate what's on the FAQ and I appreciate the effort of the U.S. Water Alliance and the staff. I can see that it was a lot of work and I love the graphic. The graphic design's very nice. Makes it really accessible and easy for people to access this information, which can be kind of complex. But there's some things I want to share a little bit. So, you know, and some of it might be repetitive, but hexavalent chromium is among the chemicals known in the state to cause cancer. And that's pursuant to California's Safe Drinking Water and Toxic Enforcement Act of 1986. And the State Water Resources Control Board is required to set these MCLs as close as feasible to the corresponding public health goal, placing primary emphasis on the protection of public health to the extent that is technologically and economically feasible. Now, I put a little smiley face by that part because of the economically feasible part is what we're going to be talking about in the second part of this workshop, because this is a whale of a cost to the water district. Here's something, and this isn't in the fact, but when we recently went to Sacramento and I was hearing our general manager say this acronym and I had no idea what it was. It sounded like a Native American word and I made a note of it, but it's OEA. And so that is actually the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment for California. And they updated non-cancer health protective concentrations for chromium-6 as 5 parts per billion based on chronic liver inflammation seen in female rats. So let's talk a little bit about the numbers, okay? You heard this a little bit, but the lowest exposure groups in these studies were still far above 23 parts per billion. So those studies do not prove that 23 parts per billion is dangerous in a direct one-to-one way, but they also don't prove it's safe. At 23 parts per billion, the risk is much higher than that benchmark that we've been talking about. Roughly speaking, it's closer to one extra cancer case out of every 800 to 1,000 people over a lifetime of exposure. Now, Austin just said this, but at 10 parts per billion, the current California legal limit, the estimated risk is about one extra cancer case out of every 2,000 people who drink that water every day for 70 years. So let's review that. That's 2 liters of water per day. That's about 8 cups every day for 70 years. And let's say this.
From the same source.
From the same source, yeah. If you're living here, let's say it like that. But this is about getting cancer. It doesn't say you're going to die from it. So I want people to understand that. We never talk about that. And it's an extra risk on top of normal background cancer risks. And not all cancers are fatal. Many are treatable or survivable. So the number of deaths would be lower than 1 in 2,000. Now, that's not a guarantee that anyone who gets sick is not going to die from cancer, but this is really about getting cancer and not from dying from it. Just to wrap up, I just want to say that hexavalent chromium is classified as a known human carcinogen, not just by the state of California, but by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, which lists it as 100 parts per billion, the International Agency for Research on Cancer, and the National Toxicology Program. But a lot of that is related to strong inhalation exposure, not necessarily drinking it. So it actually is workers exposed to airborne chromium-6 have increased lung cancer rates. So that's all from me. Director Fick?
Yes. Well, I have some observations on a grander scale. I have a suspicion. Okay, Copper Mountain is there. It's a volcanic effect that happened 1 million years ago. It also came up same time Amboy Crater came up and Black Buttes came up. Black Buttes is in the Flamingo Heights area. So my curiosity on this one is Copper Mountain the one responsible for the original or natural chromium-6 issue? I don't know, but that might be a situation. Also, I take great pity on all that text that the poster has to have. I'm a 3-time international judge on posters, and that's a lot of text to put on a poster. I can understand having to do that and have text to explain, but for a poster, that's a lot of text and work. I work under the less is more category, and that's a lot of text to have to deal with. And I appreciate all that work as far as that goes. And then also on the feasibility situation, I'm bothered by the fact that the state put in, I think, 5 or 6 tiers on this, and they put us on the second tier. The next tier above us is water districts that are probably 700 or 800 times our size. And so that's a part of the problem on the feasibility of this entire thing. I'm done.
I noticed,
Director Flowen?
thank you. I noticed that there is a section in law about doing what's practical or feasible with an amendment or something like that. And unfortunately, I didn't write it down. Does anybody know what that section is and what code it's in? If it's in the water code or in the government code or whatever it is? Because I'm kind of concerned that our legal folks, what the content of their responses are with the state.
It says, what I have here is it's Title 27, California Code of Regulations, Section 27001, which is pursuant to California State during that act that I just talked about, or Proposition 65. So hexavalent chromium is in that Code of Regulations right there.
And there was some talk about posters and such. Is something like that going to be available that we could maybe put up at the farmers market? And we might be able to shuffle some of our subject matter and stuff like that to feature some of these things.
They're posted on the wall over there, I see.
I also ordered a foam board version of the poster to use with district tours, and you're welcome to take it to them.
The thing I'm kind of sensitive about is that the blame game, and where is the public going to express its wrath when they get some of the financial numbers on this thing and how it's going to affect their household, or indeed if they will be able to keep their house because they can't afford the water bill, that kind of thing. And so I want to, and I think we're doing a pretty good job so far, be able to explain that this is not our idea, and you cannot, should not at least, blame the water company for not doing everything possible to somehow minimize the impact of this, or to get a standard change for the amount of chromium 6 parts per billion. It's that kind of a thing. Because I hate to see a lot of disruption in this organization over public anger that's misdirected at us. And posters and specifically bringing these things up, the radio station, the newspapers, and all that kind of stuff, is something that I think we need to be sensitive about. Thank you very much. That's all.
Director Jarlsberg?
Yeah, just I'm waiting to hear more as we go along, but I appreciate Director Flowen's last point about where the blame's going to go, and I'm upset with the state. And I would like them to explain why they changed the rate from EPA. When EPA obviously had to study it before the current administration, and considering that they were doing their job, and considering the impact on actual people. But I don't understand why the state, I haven't heard anything. I'm hoping maybe somebody here has heard something where their attempt to justify it, and then not to build in something for the smaller rural water districts that is an exception, or at least a statement about assistance, because they know to be a major strain. I haven't heard any explanation except that a year ago when we were in Sacramento, we began talking about this with the representatives of our state politicians. I said, why is the state doing this to us? Do they want to take over the water districts? And they said, yes. And I think there's really something behind it that the state wants to take control. And I'm hoping that we address that as we go along.
Vice President Short.
I want to second what Director Charles Burke just said, and none of us really want to or don't want to serve clean water, obviously. So we obviously want to make sure that the water we're providing to the community is safe and clean. This isn't about skirting any regulations or anything like that. So I think we need to get in front of with our public messaging on this. One thing I noticed that I would like to see that's a pretty easy change is if we could put the flyer or a link to it on the homepage of the website, because I was just trying to find it for a bit, and it can be a little confusing as to where it is. And the website was a bit long, so a lot of people around here aren't technologically savvy, so I don't know if the QR code is going to be all that helpful, but just something on the front page. So if someone's logging in to pay a bill, they see it and they know to look at it and don't have to do any kind of scavenger hunts for it. Another thing I want to bring up is on the parts per billion. Does anybody know if the impact it has on pets? I know everybody's talking about impacts on humans, but I mean, I give my dog water from the tap. And is that safe? Can anybody honestly answer that in this room right now?
Yeah, it's not something that has been brought to our attention at all.
Well, it sounds like pet rats are in danger.
Yeah. If you have a pet rat, give it to your rat. But I have a dog, so I don't know. And I had a dog last year that died of cancer, so I don't. That's a concern.
It's what you can attribute it to
Yeah.
as well. Is it
Yeah.
the dog
Exactly,
food industry?
exactly, yeah.
Is it the fast food industry? There's so much that,
Yeah.
of other impacts.
I'd also like to see maybe cancer rates. Are they higher where the chromium levels are at where we're at? We don't know these things. So these are answers that I think we need. So we can address this with the public better.
President Doolittle here. I want to follow up on a few things is related to that. So far, no one's told us that we're a cancer alley like Hinckley in the movie Aaron Brockovich. I think we would have known about this. The kind of cancer that this causes is gastrointestinal. And related to what Director Jarlsberg was asking, there was a study that came out in 2020 that I can't remember the guy's name. I have it written down at home. It's something like Cabot. I know his name starts with a C, but evidently that was what influenced the state of California to now set some different limits. And regarding the impacts on pets, I just want to say, I think we all know that the reason these studies are done on mice and rats is that they're more in line with the human body. And so anyway, if that offers you any reassurance, but I think it's a great question.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and lastly, regarding Director Fick's comment about Copper Mountain and stuff, that's a very interesting thought. And I just want to, sort of remind everybody that we have this in all of our wells and both of our aquifers. And that what we've heard is it's from rock decomposition. Now, if that has anything to do with copper, I don't know. I did have a question, and I don't know that it'll be answered here, is if we have, if this water, if it's still increasing, do we know if it's increasing or if this decomposition is still happening, if those numbers are going to be known to increase? And maybe that's going to happen. Ray's going to have the answer for us when he talks in a few minutes. Director Fick?
I'll just, Copper Mountain is called Copper Mountain, but there are other elements in it, including uranium and other things.
All right, anyone else?
So we still have other.
Director Jarlsberg?
Yeah, just to follow up on what you mentioned came out in 2020. I'd like to hear more about it, but is there the rationale of why they took a lower rate or mandated a lower rate than the EPA recommended? And then why did they lower it again? When did they do that? I think it's been since 2020.
2024 is when we
Yeah.
lowered it again.
Yeah.
Yes, and they're trying to reach the public health goal that's set by OEA.
Which is 0.02.
Right, so they're trying to reach the public health goal, but it is just a goal.
Okay.
Director Sloan?
It's a lot of this, the horse is already out of the barn on a lot of this, what we're talking about here, because this stuff has already been, I don't know if adjudicated is the right word or not. This stuff has already been presented in arguments to a court already, and the court has all of the information, and then the decision will be forthcoming as far away as June or July, something like that. So a lot of this stuff that we want to know now is not going to help us when it comes to funding and mitigation of this. So I don't know how much more good it would be. I mean, I could go on and on about aisle 2 and 3 at Stater Brothers and how they exist. Let's line up the cigarette victims and the alcohol victims and the chrome 6 victims.
Well, they're
See which is the
cigarettes
longest
now.
line. But I don't want to get into that too much, but it seems to me that
We have, so this is the public outreach portion. We're going to get into treatment and plenty of
Yes.
more questions.
So,
It's just,
okay.
section one.
Okay, so concluding board discussion, I would like to thank you for your presentation, Ms. Spain. And what's next, General Manager Johnson?
Thank you very much. And you're going to hop off and appreciate your time and effort.
Thanks, good. Thank you all.
Thank you.
So now we will transition into, this is just more of a general discussion, which is what you folks have already begun. So we appreciate that proactiveness. I'm going to introduce our interim director of ops, Greg Polish, and our district engineer, Kyle McCarty, to talk a little bit about where we've been, where we're going, and what's in the very forefront of regards to Chrome 6.
Yeah, I'll start off. Just a couple of comments. I've been in the water industry for 41 years now. And the same questions you're asking have been asked for 41 years and still no answers. Director Fick, that is a valid concern, not a concern, but it's been acknowledged that the water quality is different around Copper Mountain. It's even that way in our neighboring agency to the east. The interesting part about it is the chromium 6 is higher closer you get to Copper Mountain, but the uranium is lower. So it's interesting hydrogeology when you get to that Copper Mountain area. There's arsenic that's related to Copper Mountain, the chrome 6. So it is interesting, the hydrogeology around Copper Mountain. Definitely, it seems like the more west we go, the levels of chrome 6 decrease to almost below the 10, almost. So there is some validity to your comment. Want to kind of just give a little background. The board knows the district, in collaboration with Jacobs Engineering some time ago, did a study. We evaluated 4 treatment technologies classified as best available technology, or BAT, as we call them in the water industry, to determine the most suitable option for treatment implementation. The technologies considered were reverse osmosis, reduced coagulation filtration, strong base anion exchange, and weak base anion exchange. Following a lot of discussion, an evaluation of reverse osmosis and reduced coagulation were considered not feasible for the district for various challenges and reasons to those treatment options. So we focused on the strong base anion exchange and weak base anion exchange treatment technology. The strong base and weak base are very similar. And I want to refer to some of these graphics on the board here. And this is an example of what the similar conditions of a strong base and weak base anion exchange system will look like. You have 2 treatment vessels and some miscellaneous piping. And I'll talk, and this is kind of what it looks like real life. And I'll talk about what this tanker truck is also. It's called a roll-up regeneration process with one of the processes. So the similarities between weak base and strong base and ion exchange. Both use ion exchange vessels, like you see on the board there, to remove a negatively charged ion, or anion. In this case, it's chromium 6. Water passes through the resin, and that negatively charged ion, in this case chromium 6, this is why they call it ion exchange. That sticks to the resin and it releases another ion, typically chloride, because chloride is part of the resin. So that's that exchange part when we say an ion exchange or ion exchange. Treatment vessels for weak base and strong base look identical. Both systems require regeneration of the resin. Regeneration means that once that resin gets saturated, there's no more room for that chromium-6 to adhere to. You have to strip that chromium-6 off of that resin to regenerate it to reuse. Typically, you use salt for that regeneration for strong base or sodium hydroxide for a weak base solution. The key differences between the both. Strong base works good over a wide range of pH, so you don't have to adjust your pH. So your pH is different. It can remove some of those ions without pH adjustment. The strong base resins are what we call fully ionized across all typical drinking water pHs. In our case, our pH is about an 8. It's a little bit above. Weak base and ion exchange resins are only effective when you adjust that pH down to a 5 or a 5.5, which means you have to add typically like a sulfuric acid to the water and get that. Bring that pH down, and that's what makes that chromium ion attracted to that resin. That's the big difference between strong base and weak base. Strong base, you don't need to do pH adjustment. Weak base, you do. And then you have to bring that pH back up using weak base. You're putting it in at a 5. Now you have to bring that pH to an 8 to match what your raw water is. So you're using 2 harsh chemicals with weak base, typically sulfuric acids, 93% sulfuric acids, and 50% sodium hydroxide. That's what controls the pH.
Ray, just maybe for everyone's benefit, a balanced pH is a number of 7. Anything above that is what they determine as basic, right? Anything below that is going to be acidic. So that gives you a good frame of reference. I guess you want the really, really basic water that you want to sell, where they sell at 10.5 pH in the grocery stores, you know, on that kind of high level. And then, you know, something like orange juice is going to be pretty acidic down at like a 5.5 or a 6. So just want to give everyone a frame of reference if they're not in that world.
Yeah, thank you. And obviously for a distribution perspective, you don't want water that's acidic, that's going to be corroding or fading some pipes. You want a little bit of on the basic side. So if anything, it puts a tick of a scale on your pipe, but at 8, usually you're not building up that scale. Strong base resins. Since you're not doing chemical addition, if you build a facility using a strong base and ion exchange, you're not having chemical addition, which reduces your footprint of your treatment facility. You're only talking 2 vessels versus vessels plus chemical storage buildings, all the equipment that comes along with chemical injection. The weak base, the weak base, we have the chemical addition, right? Now you're going to have a larger footprint, you have more permits, you have more hazardous conditions, increased operator labor for maintenance and repairs, because those chemical P pumps, I've been at a treatment plant that we do pH adjustment, and it is a maintenance nightmare. It's really labor intensive. If you're using a weak base and ion exchange, you have an increased chance of exceeding the MCL. So if it's dependent on pH adjustment and you have some kind of chemical addition malfunction where that chromium-6 is not attaching, then you can exceed the MCL. Where strong base doesn't need the pH adjustment, so that pH can vary, not that it would because the groundwater is pretty stable, and it's going to consistently remove that chromium-6. Weak base, you're always at the mercy of the chemical companies and the cost of chemicals, and they're not cheap. The sulfuric acids, especially out in this area where they have to be trucked, that's another element of weak base is the cost of chemicals. And again, strong base would not require pH adjustment. Smaller footprint, reduced operator labor for maintenance and repairs of the chemical feed system. elimination of potential chemical spills. And that is a big concern when you have chemicals, bulk chemicals on site. And even though you have secondary containment, the potential for chemical spills are there. I've experienced that. It's not fun. You have to file with the California Office of Emergency Services. There's a whole process, plus the chemical disposal, the cleanup. It's quite intensive. And again, the strong base is consistent removal of that chrome 6 because it treats with a wide variety of pH. So for all these reasons, we looked at the weak base and the strong base, and we think the strong base and ion exchange would be the best for this district. Now, I talk about the regeneration process that and what happens in a system like you see on a wall here, it's called a lead and lag vessels, where the water goes in the lead vessel and that takes the brunt of the treatment, removing the brunt of the chromium 6. And then a second vessel, what they call a lag, picks up, or a polishing vessel as they call it, picks up what the lead can't remove. When it gets to that point when it's saturated, you can't remove any more chromium 6. That's when you have to take that lead vessel off a line. You can still produce water because you have your lag. Take that lead vessel and now you have to regenerate it. When you regenerate a strong base resin, you have to use what they call a brine. Basically, it's a very salty solution. And now you're putting that chloride back on the resin at a high level, which now releases that chromium. And that's what they call the regeneration of that media. That's what this roll-up regeneration process that's new to the industry has evolved. There's a company that comes out with a tanker truck that has the brine solution in it, and they actually do the regen. They're the ones that are taking that brine solution, putting it through the vessel, which releases that chromium 6, puts the chloride back on the resin, and then that water comes back out to another tanker, and that's what your regeneration water is. And then that tanker takes that down to the LA where it's processed. Now keep in mind that when we do that, that is considered a hazardous, and most likely it's going to be considered a hazardous material because of the level of chromium in that. Once it gets to the treatment facility down in LA, our responsibility for that water is no longer. They take ownership of that. It's not a cradle to grave kind of situation. It's when they pick it up, drive it down to LA, and then when it gets down to LA, then our liability is released. And of course, there's the proper insurance requirements that they carry. So that's a basic explanation of how that treatment works. It's pretty simple when you talk about an ion exchange. It's basically water in, water out. But depending on what resins you pick, whether strong base or weak base, dictates the chemicals you may need or don't need. So what we're looking at, the next step would be pilot study. You know, everything that we've done says that strong base and ion exchange is going to work, but we want to do a pilot study. A pilot study basically is just a mini version of what a full-scale treatment plant would be. The cost of the pilot study is about $60,000 per well. The state or the Department of Division Drinking Water is going to require pilot studies because that's what they want to see is going to determine the effectiveness of the treatment process, and also what the chemical makeup of that regeneration solution is going to be. And also the chemical roll-up regeneration company is going to need that data also. That way they know what they're dealing with. So pilot study is just a small scale. It flows maybe a half a gallon, quarter of a gallon per minute. It's like a little column, maybe a 2-inch or 4-inch column, a couple feet long. And it's basically flowing that water through that resin from our well. And we're getting the data to see the performance of that resin. Part of our compliance plan that has been approved is us to the end of this calendar year, December 31st of 2026, to complete our pilot study. And that's what we're going to be looking at in discussion actually this afternoon with a company that could provide that pilot study using that strong base resin that we talked about. trying to think of what else or what questions you may have of that treatment process.
It's a cradle to grave thing is something that you should just elaborate on. There are other treatment methods that we looked at, and there's other chemicals that, you know, may be involved down the road that we may have to deal with. But this process and the taking of the hazardous waste offsite and us and the district basically losing its ownership of that hazardous waste is very distinct, right? Other options would have you build containment areas on site where you would kind of thicken that and dispose of any hazardous waste that way. That would be a cradle to grave ownership of that contaminant in perpetuity. So this is a very different approach, a lot less risky long-term for the district.
The nice thing about a system like this is that you can change resins out. If something comes down the road later on where there's a different resin, maybe it performs better, the same system could be used. You can even convert from a strong base to weak base using that same system. It just changes the process.
You talk about scalability too, if we needed to add a system for a different constituent in the future.
You know, the tough part, again, I've been in this industry for a long time and the regulations are tough and the treatment processes are also tough. You know, RO will basically remove anything. However, you have a very high water loss, very high electricity costs. So it's really not practical. The thing about systems like this is typically they're very specific to the element that you're trying to remove. But in some cases, they can be used for a dual purpose, like nitrates. If nitrates comes down, we start getting nitrates. Some of the resins can do both. So that's what's nice about some of these systems. Some of them are very specific to like arsenic or fluoride. Some other resins and medias are useful for multiple constituents. So that's something that we look at also that, okay, if we choose a particular resin or media, what if something comes down the pipe in our water? Could this resin or media treat both? So that's something we also consider when we're looking at these different processes.
And I think from a scalability standpoint, these are just vessels, right? And if the constituents change over time or the requirements change over time, these vessels can be repurposed with different types of media, or they can be set in series or in parallel to remove different constituents. So the vessels are the big capital cost for the district, getting them onto the well sites, getting the piping over to them and increasing the head requirements on the pumps to make sure we overcome those losses. Those are the big capital investments. The long-term operation investments is really in the media itself and the disposal costs.
And it can be moved.
Correct. This is what they consider almost like a skid mounted type of system. Even though you can see some of the scalability, there's a person there about 6 foot. So the vessels are about 12 foot tall. They're either 8 or 10 foot in diameter. And they're about 8 or 9 feet wide. So you're not talking a large footprint just for that skid mounted type of system. Where you start increasing your footprint is when you start adding chemicals for pH adjustment, or if you wanted to do on-site regeneration with a brine, you still need all those tanks. That's what this company has developed, where they can come in, roll up to that vessel and do the regeneration. That's what they call it, the roll-up regeneration. So we would not be required to have those tanks of the brine solution and or the waste for that brine once it's used. And typically a system, you may have 2 of these skid mounts, like for well 14, it's the higher GPM, that's something that to be looked at. But typically all the wells will have 2 vessels, either 8 foot or 10 foot in diameter based on, flow rates and such. this is, again, this is looking like a two vessel system, probably 8-foot diameter. I don't know what the flow rates are for that one, but that's typically what it looks like with some miscellaneous piping or platforms around it, whatever you want to do. Some resins are not regenerable, where they get saturated and you have to take that resin out, replace it with new. That's why regenerations are very beneficial, because it saves you money. Because the cost is, as Kyle mentioned, the cost is in the resin. That's where your cost is. So if you can regenerate it and keep reusing it, that is very key. And that's what's nice about the strong base, is you can have that regeneration with the salt, and all you're doing is exchanging ions. It's a pretty simple process. Questions?
All right, so now that the presentation, treatment options and pilot studies, we invite any questions or comments from the public. Anyone online? This concludes public comment, but should some comment occur, we'll certainly entertain that. Board members, any questions or comments? And I see Vice President Short and Director Jarlsberg. Director Jarlsberg, raise your hand first.
Yeah, thank you. I was actually, it could be first, because I'm looking at a bigger picture. And I appreciate the detail on the pilot study. I've been hearing about this for a while, but really didn't know how it's going to work. And obviously we'll hear more about it as it goes along. But I was curious whether, first of all, is LA the closest disposal place that this could go? I know there's disposal in, I think it's Desert Center, just east of here.
Sure.
And I don't know, what the arrangements are there. I just know it's fairly recent that it was set up. And you see red trucks going that way.
Yeah, to my knowledge, a waste of this type is going to go down.
Got a specific place to go.
Yeah, a lot of water treatment plants.
The Hayden Springs?
Santa Fe.
Santa Fe.
Oh, okay. And because the science is changing, hopefully improving as they get more experience over the years. Obviously, things have changed over the 40 years. Are you looking to the future? I was thinking, was there any vague possibility that this process could be done with at the home, where the water is going to be used?
You
At
hear
some point in the future.
you hear of what they call point of use, POUs, as the industry calls them, point of use devices. A lot of small communities use point of use devices because the water is pretty bad and contaminated. I don't know, how cost effective that would be overall. I don't think I think the state frowns on that. I think a lot of agencies have tried to do like a point of use versus wide scale process, and they didn't, because they were concerned about, well, who's going to maintain that little system? Are they not going to maintain it? And now you're getting the higher Chrome 6. But to your point, Director Jarlsberg, is that, technology is always changing. One of the things we struggle with in the water industry when they have new regulations, sometimes the cart's in front of the horse where the technology hasn't been developed. Really good, but yet the MCL is in place. And this is what happened with the arsenic rule back in 2006, when they changed the arsenic level from 100 down to 10, is that we were forced to pick systems that didn't work. And agencies were out a lot of money. They built these systems and they didn't perform, and they had to mothball them. So this is one of our arguments to the state all the time with regulations is, let's make sure the technology's there. And that goes back to that economic feasibility, because it makes an impact on the community. So it's been a struggle for, many decades. But it's something we're always aware of, what technology may be coming down the pipe to use. How can we pick a system that we might be able to change, if necessary, to different resins? So those things are always considered in the process, but sometimes our hands are tied because we have time constraints, and we do our best to pick something that we think is going to be economically right for the community.
And typically point of use is for 200 or less connections, and we have far more than that. And it's usually for a very small period of time that the state will allow it until you get to a centralized treatment.
Okay, and I have another follow-up question regarding the trip to LA of this major truck. What if something happens on the way down the hill? Is it our responsibility or is it somebody else's?
Obviously, we're going to be looking into that because the questions are, well, obviously the tanker truck has insurance, but it's our product. So, how that exactly works, we're definitely going to look into that. It's always a concern when any type of tanker truck, we see them, all the time through the community. There's far worse products that are being brought through this community. But those are the things we have to look at and have agreements with when that time comes with the company about the responsibility of, the waste and who's responsible for it, all those sort of questions.
Yeah, okay.
Definitely a concern.
And I would definitely recommend that your insurance carrier review all of those policies and any adjustments that they feel you guys need to revamp over.
Vice President Schroeder?
Yeah, I have a comment and just one question. Just for the public information, anybody's watching this or anybody in the room that doesn't know, why it's important to have something that is as flexible as this system. So everybody here knows that the Chromium 6 mandate is unfunded. We're not getting any money from the government as of right now to pay for the funding for this. And this isn't going to be the first one. There's going to be more coming down from the state. I can see PFAS easily being a thing in the future for every water district, and nitrates as well. So having something that we can add to or change the purpose of is vital in helping save people money. I know looking at this, everybody's probably thinking it's expensive, and it is, but it could be worse. And it's a smart move doing something that is flexible and universal. My question is, how many of the wells are getting these treatment systems?
Okay. Our lowest Chromium 6 concentration is well 10. This is the well that sits in the maintenance shop yard. That's right about 13 parts per billion. Our highest well, closer we get to Copper Mountain Mesa, Copper Mountain, I should say, is 37. And that's well 16 at the Ward Airport out there. So we range anywhere from a 13 to a 37. What's also good about a system like this that I failed to mention is that take well 10, for example, you have 13. It's really close to that 10. You don't have to treat every drop of water. You can bypass a certain amount of raw water, blend it with the treated water to meet the MCL. And those are just averages, weighted averages when you cap that out. And what happens, why that's important, because now you're reducing the loading rate. You're reducing the amount of chrome that's attaching to that resin. So it makes it last long, which reduces your maintenance costs. So a system like this is really nice because you can bypass a certain percentage of your raw water. Well 10, we could probably bypass about 75%. Well 16, we could probably bypass only about 10 or 20% because the concentrations are higher. So that all dictates your O&M costs.
I got one follow-up. So why couldn't we do something that's centralized?
We looked at that. We took a very hard look at that. One of the biggest deterrents about centralized is even though you build redundancy into a centralized plant, that plant goes down, we lose our capability of producing water.
All right, that's all for me. Thank you.
Director Fick?
Okay, I'm sort of a larger overview, several questions. One, what is the history of Chromium 6 treatment? How far back does this go? About 30 years or so? When did they decide the Chromium 6 was a problem?
Well, it's interesting because the federal level is 100 parts per billion of total chromium, meaning Chromium 6 and Chromium 3, right? Chromium 3 is the good chromium. That's the trivalent chromium. Chromium 6 is the hexavalent. So it's been 100 across the board, except California, they had 50 total. So I'm not aware until this recent MCL of 10, with California specific at an MCL of 10, of any Chrome 6 specific systems. Ion exchange is used for other constituents, nitrates, arsenic, things like that. But chromium, I'm not aware of any across the country that have had to do chromium-6 treatment specific. But it goes back to the levels in California are just so much lower than federal.
But the process is the same. Like the process they're going to treat other chemicals similar to Chrome-6. The chemistry is very similar. So
Yeah.
Just a different stage.
Yeah, I did look into what's called reverse osmosis, and they figured that it's to have it professionally installed into houses is roughly $1,500 to $2,000 per house. But then they have to figure in the lawyers having to go into those houses because of maintaining that, and that's a legal problem, is as you say.
Not only that, you talk about water loss, right? Here we are trying to promote water conservation, and reverse osmosis really isn't good for that, because you only have, you're going to lose, 30 gallons for every 100 that you treat.
And where does that 30 gallons go?
Down into your septic.
Or gray water.
Gray
Gray water.
But my point is that it's just a really high waste of water.
Okay. Another question is, it sounds like the strong base versus weak base. It sounds like the weak base came out first because it's far more complex. And then my question would be, what is the ratio of strong base to weak base in the field out there? In other words, I assume a lot more people are using the strong base process than the weak base process.
That data, I don't know, Director Fig, about any kind of percentages of who's using what. I will say when I came into this, my mindset was weak base, 100% weak base. That's what we were going to do. But what's changed with the strong base is this roll-up regeneration process. If I can avoid having the amount of chemicals that you need to adjust pH on site and all the caveats that come along with that, I will do my best to look at that option. And that's what came about with the strong base, with this roll-up regeneration. That's what made it very more attractive to me, to really take a hard look at strong base, that you can do the regeneration with the roll-up. But weak base is very good. But again, it has some nuances that you have to be careful of.
Yeah, it sounds like it's for a larger scale of treatment of water.
It just depends. It depends on the water quality, the chemistry, all that. One of our biggest concerns here is sulfates. Sulfates is kind of like a bully in the room. It's going to be the bully inside that vessel. Sulfates are going to be more attracted to that resin than sort of about the burn and say, hey, I want to get here first. And that's not very effective. We have one well 15, that has very, very high sulfates. This is the well that we're going to be doing that profiling on to see if we could find better water quality, specifically Chrome-6. Again, that could be a game changer for the district, not having treatment on well 15. Now you use well 15 primarily. It keeps the loading rate off of the systems that could be at well 10, well 14, 16, and 17. So it's a pumping strategy. If you could find better water quality, use that water primarily to reduce the treatment plant and the loading rate, which reduces your overall maintenance cost.
Okay, well, I can think out of the box. We should put a well to the extreme west end of Joshua Tree to suck it out of the Warren Basin, which doesn't have chromium-6. Think about that. Okay, another question, and you keep on referring to it, resin. Is this tree sap? What is the origin of this resin?
So it's a polymer-based product. I don't know the makeup of it, but I just know it's a polymer-based resin. It's like little beadlets that, in this case, I don't know what color they are. It's just a resin that are polymer-based, polymer-made composite. Some are iron, some are activated alumina, but in this case, it's a special polymer that attracts the chromium or chromium-6. Releases the chloride when the chromium gets to it. That's the exchange. And then you put the chloride back on when you do the regeneration.
Yeah, I figured it was pellet form because that would be the most exposure to the water.
Correct, because it's all about that surface area. How much surface area is available for that ion. It's like putting two magnets together. They stick together. That's what happens with the chromium or the chromium-6 onto that resin. And then it's released, like when you turn the magnets, it won't stick. When you put that brine solution in, it releases that chromium, and now you're putting the chloride back on the resin. So it's just the chemistry and the negative and positive charged ions. That's the chemistry that goes on there.
The resin companies, I mean, that's their secret sauce. They're not sharing any of that.
Correct. Doesn't have the ingredients.
Yeah, yeah.
And keep in mind too, that, you know, anything we do, and it's a requirement that it has to be either what they call NSF or 60 or 61, which means it's meant for drinking water. It's gone through all the testing to be okay for drinking water. Even some of the chemicals that they put in for pH adjustment have to be NSF 60 rated. So anything that we do has to have, like the resins, like a lot of companies are coming out with resins. They're trying to develop these resins, and they have to go through that testing process and make sure they pass NSF 61 standards.
Is media and resin used synonymously?
Yeah.
Context.
Yes. Media is not a polymer based. Resins are polymer based. Media is usually an iron, aluminum, things like that.
And
I just had a follow-up what he was saying. Does any of this come from China or other countries? You know that we're in the middle of all this?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know yet.
Because the substances, we've been talking about it a lot at the federal level.
Yeah.
You know.
So those are questions that we're definitely going to be asking the makers of this. Because any of the grants that we go after often will have a clause that you have to have Build America, Buy American. So those are questions that have to be figured out. And then to answer a question that you had, Director Fick, of other agencies using this technology, we do know a few others that are also talking to the same companies that we are. But as Ray was sharing, what other people are using in their districts is all dependent on what's already in their water. So the sulfates example, if they have high sulfates, this may not be a good option for them. So that's why the state offered 3 best available technologies, and then each district or agency has to determine what's going to work best for them out of those technologies because of the chemistry of the water and many other factors as well.
I just had a thought on RO, correct me if I'm wrong, but we toured the RO treatment center on the base, and pre-COVID, that was $250 to $300 million. And one of the things that's important to remember with RO is the ongoing operating costs, because you have to reintroduce minerals and things back into the water because RO strips everything out. Right?
It would be the choice of the agency. Yes, it's RO is not distilled, but it's pretty close. It's pretty close. Electricity, you need a high pressure, so you need high horsepower pumps to push that water through those membranes. That's what makes RO very expensive from an electric standpoint also, where the resins aren't.
Large footprint as well.
Large footprint, because then you have where you're going to do all that waste. The base has big evaporation ponds, which are, probably 10, 15 acres of ponds. So this all goes to the evaluation of the processes that are out there, what's best for this district.
Director Flon.
Yes, ma'am. This media that the water is going to go through, it says it's on this information that I have here, it's a porous synthetic polymer beads. In other words, a styrene, benzene phopolymers. Some of that sounds like plastic. And so we are hearing some sensitivity to plastics in the water. And I'm wondering if there's any erosion of these polymer beads that is going to contribute to a plastic problem, which is going to then encounter state standards at some point, which is going to cause us to throw away the $60 million worth of.
Well, that's why we rely on the NSF, that's the National Sanitation Foundation. They're the ones that take these media's resins and they do their testing to make sure they're not going to leach any elements into the drinking water. That's why they have to go, and that's why some companies don't do it, because of the expense of that testing, I've heard. But the ones that are pretty confident that their media resins are going to pass, they'll move forward. But that we rely on the NSF to do that testing so we know it's good for drinking water.
Is there an issue with, when we get these systems installed, is there going to be a volume issue where we're going to have difficulty filling our 17 tanks because of this additional filtering, so to speak, of the water?
You're always concerned what we call head loss. So if your well discharge is say 150 PSI, pounds per square inch, by the time it has to push through that resin, maybe it's reduced to say 120. Now, is that enough to push it up to the reservoir? So those are the things that we take a look at, and that's part of the engineering process. We look at, do we need a little booster pump to reboost that pressure? Typically with an ion exchange, you don't see a lot of head loss. If you do, you backwash that resin and it kind of, because it gets compacted over time. It sits there, right? The water's pushing through it and it just kind of slowly, it's like if you take a thing of sand and you beat it on the table, it's going to just compact. That's what happens with these resins and media. That's why sometimes you backwash them. That's why it's also important to have a pre-filter for the water before it goes into the beds. You know, any sand that could be coming from the well, even though we have very clean water coming out of our wells, it's always a possibility. You don't want that sand getting into that resin. What they call short circuiting means the water it's plugged up. The resins are, the flow of the water is getting plugged up and it's trying to find a way through. And that's what they call short circuiting. That's where you get your high head loss. So those are the things we're always going to consider and look at when we do and that's why it's important for the pilot study, right? That gives us that data. What are you seeing through this small scale version that we're going to have to think about when we build full scale?
So how about we're sort of proud of the taste of the water. It's not hard to detect the difference between water from 29 Joshua Tree or, Yucca. Is any of this going to affect the taste of the water? Because I've always understood that the flavor of the water comes from the mineral content, not the actual.
Yeah, I don't know that Chrome has a flavor, Chromium 6, so it shouldn't. And the short answer is it should not. But it's always a concern. But again, that goes back to the NSF testing. They have to make sure that whatever product is being used is not leaching off any type of, taste or odor or any kind of microplastics, color, things like that. Iron-based used or
clarity would be a big
water. That's what's bad about reduced coagulation filtration. You're using a ferrous iron. Yeah, ferrous iron, chloride. And again, it's for the pH, and that stuff will turn everything red. So those are the things that we consider when we talk about the treatment. But to your concern, no, it should not, but that's part of the process of us doing our testing and all the certifications that go along with it.
So this system, it's not actually, I'll say, a mechanical filter. It's that the chromium, it's a metal and it's got a charge that could be either positive or negative. And so these polymer beads has to be adjusted to do either to attract either. It's an attraction type of a thing rather than a mechanical filter like the air filter in your car or your oil filter or something like that.
And so they refer to it as a passive system.
And
yeah, there's no mechanical work going on.
And so you could actually have a mix of those polymer beads that would attract both positive and negative ions.
I haven't heard of a system that has both like that. If anything, you would have a different vessel with maybe that different resin that has a different charge to it. But combined, I think it would, fight each other, so to speak.
Yeah, that's why it seemed confusing to me.
Yes. And again, the Chrome 6 is a negatively charged ion. The resins are positive, or and that chemistry works, and then you reverse it with the regeneration process. Now you're changing the charge of the resin with the brine, which releases the chromium 6 that's accumulated over time.
It sounds impressive. It really does. It's just that the cost is impressive too. Thank you.
All right, Director Fichter.
Yeah, I was going to have it. What is your history?
My history?
Your history as far as water treatment goes, because 29 Palms, did that need water treatment?
Yeah. So my history, again, I'm approaching 41 years here in a couple of weeks, being in the water industry. I started out as a pipeliner. I was very interested in water treatment back in probably the 90s, because that's when 29 Palms, they had a fluoride issue, a naturally occurring fluoride issue. And they were mandated to have fluoride treatment by a certain year. So that's when I got into the fluoride treatment. That's a similar process, but it's not ion exchange. You're just absorbing the fluoride on that media, and that's an activated alumina media. And then when the arsenic rule came, again, going back to we were forced to do systems. We chose a system. It's about a mile west of the college. On the north side of the road is 2 tan vessels sitting right there, right off the highway. That was put there to remove arsenic. Works on the same type of concept, where it's just absorbing, absorbing is the outside sticking, surfing, a sponge's adsorption where it goes into it. What we found with this system is that the media, which was an iron-based media, was not performing to where the manufacturers promised. They said, we guarantee you it's going to have X gallons of treatment. Everybody was falling short of that. In the contract, it said, well, we'll just prorate the media. Let's just say you only got half the life of it. We would only charge you half of the media. What happened is they just cranked up the price of the media. So what we developed, we worked with the US EPA, and we developed a process. It was featured in the AWWA journal several years ago. And we developed a process to regenerate that iron-based media, which saved us a ton of money. And so, I mean, my water treatment background is only kind of limited to like the groundwater when it comes to absorption, ion exchange, type of thing. Conventional treatment plants are usually surface water, and then unconventional are usually like groundwater, activated alumina, iron-based media. So it's kind of a passion of mine, the water treatment, and I've learned a lot over the years for sure. And that's why I'm happy to help this district out as we move forward with Program 6. So it's a constant. What I tell the operators, you don't be a robot. You're constantly learning. You're constantly learning the process. In 29 Palms, we had a small pilot system in our lab at our big treatment plant because we were constantly testing. We were constantly trying to find ways to do it better, more efficient, save money, save the water loss. So kind of my background.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Mr. Fick. I think to echo that, with these systems, when they're put in, we're going to be going through pilot testing. We're going to have a good idea about how long the media life is and the regeneration cycles that are anticipated. Obviously, as we go to full scale, we're going to feel that, and we'll be adjusting our water operations well use to kind of maximize operational value to the best of our ability. And that'll be key to saving the district money year over year.
The arsenic treatment, was that in Joshua's Water District?
No, that's in the 29 Palms Mountains.
But it's east.
I know the edge. It's the last parcel in 29 Palms before you start concentrating treatment.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of parcel. But that well, high arsenic, high fluoride. I don't have the chrome. It's the closest to. So going back to our conversation, it's kind of interesting with the hydrogeology.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, I have a few things. I've been taking notes. So it's good to see you, Ray, and I just want to tell you thanks for still being here. We really appreciate you being here, and thanks also, Mr. McCarty, Kyle McCarty, for being here as well. And it's evident. This is the first time we've been able to really talk about this, and it's evident that there's, I think pretty much the full time we've been able to talk about it in depth. That it's been lots of work for everyone, and today's been kind of a little bit of a chemistry lesson. And I want to say that I have a weak base of knowledge now after talking about all this. But there's a few things that bother me. I'm not wearing my tie-dye today, but I'm a little bit of a hippie. And when you start saying styrene and benzene, I get extremely nervous. And one thing that concerns me is I know that you're saying we rely on NSF 61 ratings. I imagine that NSF has failed ratings in the past. with that they've rated things and then those things haven't lived up to that. And one of my concerns is that they're not measuring each load of resin that we get. I mean, the resin's not a stable thing. We get new resin every once in a while, right?
Maybe 10 years.
Oh, okay.
It could
All
be
right.
replaced, to your point.
Okay, yeah, so just a little concerned about that because I am concerned about PFAS because we do have aquifers. Our aquifers right now do not have plastics in them. We're some of the rarest water in the world because of that. And you know what a terrible irony that the state would have us do this and then all of a sudden we're polluting our lovely water with plastics, with styrene and benzene and little beads. You guys know about those bath beads and how we got rid of those because those were, poisoning the oceans essentially with all these bath beads every time you'd have a wave come up. And, so this, I'm extremely concerned about this. So I have some questions. So one is that what Director Fick said about how much did y'all examine the idea of a new well at the west end, or that wouldn't work anyway because we'd still have to pipe that water all around, or?
It's something that we've looked at in our 10-year capital improvement budget to look for a new well. We call them redundant wells, where we do that location, that's obviously what we look at. The other concern, as we all know, the further west we go, the nitrates go higher. So there's always a water quality. Now we can do monitoring wells. That's something we've been talking about recently. You're putting a monitoring well in. That way you could get samples to test that water to see if there's maybe a plume of nitrates or what the water quality is like. It's just a small little well. So that's something you're always going to do as you explore maybe the potential for a new well within the district.
So thank you. So actually, as you can see from my notes, I have lots of questions. And again, because we haven't been able to sit down and talk about this. And one thing I wanted to say is I recently asked the general manager to send me a list of some of the things we have to do. And the district has to do. And the first thing she sent me was a regulations list. And, people always think, oh, well, water should be free. And you know what I mean? We shouldn't have to pay for water and everything. That regulations list is 3 pages long. And that's all the things that the district has to meet and all these things that we have to send out to other agencies that are looking at what we do nationally and statewide and actually the county as well. So one thing I forgot to say about the NSF 60 or 61 rating is I imagine that's a limit and it's not 0, right, for the polymers? That they're not saying, oh, well, this has 0 polymer loss or degradation in this resin.
I don't know the answer to that. I think it would be that.
Yeah.
Now, the one thing we can do is that, and it may be a requirement from the state, say, hey, we want you to test downstream of the plant to see if there are certain constituents that could determine there's something leaching off the resin.
Could that be done in the pilot study?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so yeah, and okay, with the best testing that we can have, because even if it costs a little bit more, just so we know.
I agree.
Right. So could you just say the names of the different treatments? You kind of said them fast and I was taking notes. So what are, that's okay.
So you have reverse osmosis.
Okay.
You have what commonly referred to RO.
RO.
You have reduced coagulation filtration, RCF.
Okay.
And then there's 2 types of anion exchange, weak base anions and strong base anions.
Okay. Is weak less expensive than strong?
It may be less expensive upfront,
Okay.
but long term, I think what you run into is due to the chemical addition that's needed, you run into the increased O&M costs that come along and the operator labor that's needed to maintain a chemical feed system. And also the additional infrastructure that happens.
If the prices of those vessels come down a little bit, they're offset by chemical storage and the chemical piping. So they're really close. It's slightly cheaper.
And the strong base present delivery, very little operator. It's basically water in, water out because you're not changing the pH. So it's very simplified from an operator perspective.
And how expensive is the resin? That's something we have to replace every 10 years. Is that $1 million or what is that?
We don't know the cost of that yet. That's something that we're doing in our process of,
Okay.
the pilot study, because, you're always at the mercy of the resin manufacturers, without a doubt.
Okay. So another thing, again, putting back on my tie-dye outfit, another thing that I'm concerned about is trucking our waste. Now, we all read the national news. What you always hear, nobody likes for one community to transfer its waste to another community. I know that we'll probably get more in-depth reporting on how this treatment is, but we live in the desert, and I heard you say that somebody has a 15-acre treatment that they're doing with this waste, and we have these great filters with the desert sand and stuff like that. So I just want to have some more confidence about this, because it's like, here the state's making us do this. And I heard General Manager Johnson say this when we were in Sacramento, but now we're creating hazardous waste that we have to send somewhere. So, what other options do we have besides that?
To my knowledge, none.
Oh, okay.
We're already, transporting hazardous waste when it comes to oils,
Okay.
things like that. We all know there's tons of hazardous waste that go through our community and others. But to your point, it's always a concern. A good thing on this, it's just water that just has a high concentration of chromium. It's not flammable or things like that. But it's always a concern. But we are at the mercy of where these locations are, the facilities are, and we are so remote, which makes it more challenging also.
That is something that we bring up in every meeting that we've had. We've discussed that.
I thought, and I could have heard this wrong in our meeting with the Strong Base folks, but isn't the facility in Santa Fe Springs, they actually want that material, right? They're taking the hazardous waste and they're repurposing.
They're doing something.
They're doing something, and I didn't get into it much. I just remember hearing that. And we could explore that more just to understand, okay, what are they doing with it? But they were very big on our liability ended there. So.
Oh, that was my question.
Yeah.
That's a bigger deal than most realize. If there were some way for us to store it or put it in ponds, or we would have it for perpetuity, forever. So if that impacted our aquifers in the future because we were digging a hole and putting it there, that's forever. Wherever we put it, it's forever. But this situation, it ends at their door, which is a really great option for the district, liability wise.
Okay, Vice President Short, you indicated you had a question.
Oh, yeah. How much waste are we talking about when we do these?
That truck right there is probably.
Wasn't that the brine?
Yeah, but that's what you're talking about. So this truck's gonna roll up and it's gonna brine it, just a salt water, very high concentration of salt. They're gonna pump it through the vessel, which is releasing that chromium 6. And I think they may have a second.
They have a
tanker.
second tank.
So this one's gonna be empty. And I think this it's a smaller diameter, I don't know, maybe 7,000 gallons, something like that. So this one will be empty. It's gonna fill another one that has that high concentration. So again, maybe I guess maybe 5.
Okay.
And I don't remember, Ray, they needed their own truck for each well when they came out, or they were gonna hit multiple wells
They would have their own.
for each well.
Yeah, correct.
And they would be on different schedules.
Okay.
And again, but it all depends on how much we run that well, right? We control the loading rate based on, how much we run it. And again, it goes back to Kyle's comment about we have to be very strategic on how we do operations with directing that water.
And you also gotta keep equipment going, so we can't just like mothball some of the wells, like we're gonna have to run them a little bit, keep them prime. But definitely there's gonna be a strategy there.
And how old is this technology?
An ion exchange has been around for a very long time.
Okay.
It's just the different resins that are being developed for their different constituents.
So in another 10 years, it's conceivable that the cost of this resin is going to decline.
Good.
Okay.
It could. Supply and demand.
And do we have a ballpark of when the pilot study is going to take place?
We're having a discussion this afternoon. We're hoping to start, with an agreement and get started maybe within a month.
Okay,
Because each well could take up to 3 months to do a pilot study.
Finish by the end of the year.
okay.
Director Fick?
Yes, on the pilot study, does it do one well at a time or you do all 5 at once?
One well at a time. Oh, you can do all 5
Yeah.
wells at the same time, but each have their own individual equipment.
Okay.
Because they have different levels of chromium in it, right?
Correct.
Yeah, it sounds like that hazardous waste is valuable. Maybe we could sell it to this group.
Well, we went through that in 29 with the fluoride. Hey, the fluoride has a value to it, but
Okay, and I rarely get to add this anecdote, but Judge Leroy Simmons, in 1994, he was the judge for our Broadwell toxic waste dump situation. He was bribed by our county, an environmental arbitration contract. He was a retiring Superior Court judge in Barstow. He was given that contract. His next case was the Aaron Brockovich case. So it's a small world. Thank you.
All right, so I have another question. So what are some of our, what kind of decisions are, I can't remember if it's Desert Valley or Coachella Water or whatever. What are some of their decisions? What are they looking at as far as treatment goes?
down in the lower desert, I think Wyoming Dunes, they're looking at the same technology we are. Can't comment on other agencies, a couple of years ago, status chloride was the saving grace. It's not, because you convert chromium-3 back to chromium-6 in the system. That's the downside to status chloride. So I don't have a lot of information what other systems presently do, but I know that a lot of systems are in the same boat as we are. They're looking.
Mission Springs is looking.
So will it take 1,000 years to remove all the chromium from our water using the system? Or never, it's never gonna
I
happen?
don't know if I had that answer.
Okay, all right, yeah.
By my crystal ball.
Okay.
But we have a conversation, right? It's just because the formations that are down there. So it's just that formation, those rock formations that are just reaching that
Over and
that
over. Yeah.
constituent out.
Right, seeing no more questions. Oh, does our Citizens Advisory Council Chair have any questions or comments to make?
Well,
David Carrillo?
Ian, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
First thought was, what if the state funds us to do a beta test for other people that are having this problem, since there's nobody that quite has the same problem as us? Or is there somebody that's has similar problems with chromium that has already done this? Can we learn from them?
I don't think there is, because the chromium-6 rule or NCL is new. It's very specific to the fix. There's other anion exchange systems out there that use constituents. But I don't remember the number of agencies that are impacted by the TAM. It's a
It's
lot.
about 200, and the state can allow us to use another agency's pilot study because the chemistry of the water at every well is very specific. So it has to be at your particular well.
Thank you.
And I forgot to mention this, that in my research, I found a Los Angeles Times article when Governor Davis signs the bill speeding water testing for chromium-6, and that was in the year 2000. And that bill was actually brought by Adam Schiff. So I just wanted to share that with you all. So I believe there are no more questions or comments. We now pause this workshop for a brief break before returning to part 2, which will be a discussion of funding related to chromium-6 treatment, economic feasibility, et cetera. So we're back at 11. All right, let's bring this workshop back to order from our break. Thank you, everyone. Let's continue. No, I don't think so. Once again, please hold your questions until the presentation conclusion, please. And this is going to be workshop part 2, led by Director of Finance Ann Roman and our consultant in the room, Dmitry Semenov. Hi, Dmitry, nice to see you. Of Ridgeline Municipal Strategies, along with JBWD staff.
Good to see everyone in the morning and certainly today. Everyone has bright faces today. All right, so today we do have a special guest. We've been working with Dmitry from Ridgeline for about 4 to 5 months on a cash flow projection. And so today we're going to see the results of that projection. especially how it pertains to financing for Chromium 6 or Chromium 6 financial needs. And with that, I will just turn it right over to Dimitri.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. And so before we dive into the study and the slides and stuff, it might be worthwhile to mention about what the Chromium 6 project construction cost is likely to run.
Yes. So we did the alternatives analysis, so I know that you remember that Jacobs, sorry.
No, I think it is. Is it?
No, that's not what it sounded like.
No.
Maybe stop the share and reshare.
Pocket dial.
All right, we'll bring that back up momentarily. All right, if you recall, we did the alternative analysis with Jacobs Engineering and West Coast Civil, and the engineer's estimate is roughly $60 million, give or take, 40% in either direction. So today you're going to see a 10-year forecast, and in these numbers, we did the worst case scenario, which we believe is 60 million. That's the number that we've been using. But we also put in 20. Doesn't mean it's going to be 20, but we want to see it and more of a best case scenario. Should we get any community project funding? Should we get grants? Should we get SRF? So we can see, what the best case will look like. So it's not a promise. It's just for discussion.
Okay, thank you. So my name is Dimitri Semenov. I'm with Bridgeline Useful Strategies. And what we do besides events, we help communities with financial planning and financing for water and wastewater projects.
And do you think you could share? I can share. I can try. Yeah. I also have a PDF of if the slideshow is not going to cooperate. With the slideshow and see if that will cooperate from here.
We wish the funds could be diverted to this room to fix the strange anomalies.
So that happens.
Something
It's a desert vertex.
We spent an hour in here yesterday preparing and did not have these.
A vortex.
An hour, huh? Yeah, everybody online, please stand by while we figure out how to share without the audio feedback.
Better.
Here we go. Thanks.
All right.
Okay. Next slide, please. So what we do is we help communities fund water and wastewater projects and figure out how to pay for them. I've been on the street for 30 years. And I've done over 150 different financings. Okay. And financed over $1 billion in different projects. So in our role, we act as a fiduciary to public agencies. So we represent the best interest of our clients. And really our goal is to help figure out how to pay for projects the most effectively and efficiently, and making sure that the fiscal responsibility is a baseline of the planning. It's not just about let's borrow money. So let's figure out what's the best way to help us. Next slide, please. These are some of the clients that we worked with in the past. And the city of Santa Fe Springs, as we mentioned, that's one of the clients. But quite a bit of things in this area and also California. So in terms of the context, as Sarah mentioned, we're looking at a Chromium 6 project that might run somewhere between $20 and $60 million. Okay, that's a very wide range. But it's only a part of the overall context. We're looking at the next decade, through 2035. The district, besides the Chromium 6 project, will have to build another
roughly $40 million worth of other improvements. So Chromium 6 is just part of the puzzle. There's a lot of other stuff that is happening. So the total CIP over the next decade, with the big variable being Chromium 6, is going to run anywhere from $60 to $100 million. So this is the nut that we're trying to crack and figure out how do we structure the financial operations of the district to make sure that that works. And what we needed to do was lay out the roadmap. And in that roadmap, we looked at the net revenues. And the net revenues is the financing term, which means your gross revenues, it's everything you charge, minus your O&M expenses is the net revenues, right? That's what you have available, once you've covered your operating costs. And that's tied to another financing concept that we'll talk about, debt service coverage ratio. And then based off of that, what's the net cash flow? We're looking at reserves, we're looking at capital projects, how we're going to fund them. We're looking at the financing strategy, if there's any debt that needs to be incurred, how we best structure it. And then also, all of this ties into your rates, because really rates are your big fundamental source of funding. So what does it mean for the ratepayers? So that's the roadmap that we'll be looking at today. As we're going through this, feel free to ask questions. If something sounds complicated, if I'm not making sense, numbers can be confusing and they're not intuitive. So don't be afraid to ask a question. In terms of the key assumptions, as we built out a very large cash flow model. I think out of all the time that we spent on details, going through line by line, we started staffing out the level. Then we looked at the revenues, we looked at the operations. We looked at capital expenses. Sorry.
We're having difficulty seeing it. It's a common problem for us.
So it's a very elaborate model that lies behind. It's not something simple, just throw inflation and see what sticks. We really spent a lot of time and effort going through all the different line items to make sure we understand what's the revenue base and what's the cost base is. Okay. So in terms of rates is the big input. And the fundamental assumptions is you have one more rate increase left under the current rate study. And that's starting on January 1st, 2027. And that's 9.3%. So we assume that that is happening. And then going forward for the baseline scenario, we assumed annual 5% increases. And that's tied to the inflation. The inflation is assumed to be, baseline inflation is assumed to be about 3% per year. So basically, the rates are helping you keep up with inflation, but then there's also a cushion of an additional couple percent over the inflation, because not everything in the water service mirrors inflation. Some things are going up faster, and then certain things that the district is doing need to also factor into account that will add to the existing operating costs in addition to the full. And another line item on the revenue side is property taxes. They've been growing 4+% per year. Sometimes it's 4, sometimes it's 7, sometimes it's 9. But we assume 3.5% continuing growth rate over the next decade. So those are the fundamental growth assumptions on the revenue side. On the expense side, and for the reserves, we assume 3% investment return per year. So on the expense side, we developed a very detailed staffing model. Staffing is a major operating cost for the district. So we went through every position, went through all the steps, went through inflation, COLAs, the benefits, looked at who else needs to be added to the district. There's a lot of conversations, there's a lot of planning that went into the process. So it's a very elaborate staffing model. And we assumed that the district is fully staffed at all times. So that's a fundamental assumption in the model, is now you're almost at the fully staffed level, you're approaching it, and that will continue throughout the next decade. As I mentioned before, 3% inflation rate is a fundamental assumption. And then for a lot of the line items, specific assumptions were made as well. For Chromium 6, we've added an operating line item that's not currently in the budget. We assume once all the wells are online, the current placeholder is about $750,000 a year in costs. And that's projected to grow at about 5% per year. Now, based on our discussion, Ray, you mentioned that that might be aggressive, but we want to make sure that we're fundamentally financially sound to be able to pay for this. Right, so this model tends to err on the side of conservative assumptions. We're not hoping for the best. This is not also the sky is falling scenario. Even though once we start delving into the upper scale of the Chromium 6 project, that's the case. But in general, it's a realistic model. The goal is to get us as close as possible to the out. And what's on the screen is the summary of the 10-year model. The blue line is your gross revenues. That's the rates, that's the property taxes, that's the investment earnings. Okay, that's how much money the district is bringing in. The orange line is the operating costs. So that's the payroll, that's the chemicals, that's the maintenance, pretty much anything and everything that takes running this district. Okay, and again, the assumption is inflation is at 3% and rate increases happening every year at 5%. It includes existing debt service on your existing debt, but no additional debt is factored into this calculation. Okay, so right now this is baseline. Assume Chromium 6 is running, but we're not incurring any debt or not paying for it yet. Right? No capital costs are included in this model yet. And also we've excluded wastewater fees and we've excluded the assessments for Copper Mountain mess. So the result is actually very, very strong. The district, with these assumptions, is fundamentally very financially sound. You're generating about $4.4 to $5 million a year in net revenue. That's essentially your net cash flow. Okay, that's what you're bringing, all the revenues minus your operating expenses. That money is available for you to fund capital improvements, as well as if you incur debt to pay for that debt. Okay, so that's the fundamental conclusion is, as you know, at 5% rate increases, you're operating very, very healthily, and you have plenty of room to address a lot of capital improvements and take on some debt. Any questions so far? Yes.
Vice President Short.
So my first question is actually for the staff here. When was the last time we were fully staffed? So
Yeah. That's magical thinking then, right? That slide.
So I don't know how accurate the assumption would be that would be fully staffed.
We're about to be.
That's
Yeah,
that's the previous slide, isn't it? Can you go back one slide? Isn't it?
It was one of the assumptions.
Okay. Okay, yeah.
So we're sitting at what was it, a 5% proposed rate increase with a 3% inflation rate. I get where you get that numbers, but you have to keep in mind that we live in a community with 25% of the population living below the poverty line. We have people out here in mass that their only source of income is through Social Security or VA disability. The increase of that last year was 2.8%. The increase before that was 2.5, 3.2 in 2023, and 8.7 in 2022. So with the 5% rate increase, that is going to be pretty much eating up the entirety of people's increases from their sources of income. So when I hear this, it's throwing up some serious red flags for me when I hear the amount this is going to cost. I like that it's less than it is right now. I think that's a good thing, but I think we really need to be wary of how this is going to impact the community one way or the other. And putting more stress on people like this, it's going to hurt people. And I don't want to be the ones to drive people out of the community. They're feeling it already everywhere. People are paying more for propane, for gas at the pump, for groceries, for electricity. And for a community-owned organization, I don't want us to be the ones that, the straw that breaks the camel's back. So
All right.
this is something that we need to really look into as to whether or not we can afford these rates.
I appreciate this comment right now, and I appreciate the deliberation, but I think we should have it at the end of the presentation because we don't know what the rest of the presentation is going to say, unfortunately, since we don't have the slides. Is that okay, Director Jarlsberg, if we wait, or did you have just a clarification on the fact?
What
Some
something
facts?
said, and then I will reserve my other questions.
Okay, thanks.
You said that this presentation, this section of your presentation right now was to bring us to what reality is. And you said something about debt on debt. Would that mean that mostly we're going to get loans and then we got debt on that debt?
We'll talk about financing in a second.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, that was kind of triggered something when you
The
said,
goal is not to say we have to fund everything with debt. That's not.
no, I'm not saying that either. I'm just saying to clarify what you said, debt on debt implies loans, not grants.
I'm not sure what. We're not planning to fund all of this with debt.
No. I get that. We're not there yet.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, please proceed.
All right, so when it comes to capital projects, I mentioned that over the next decade, we're looking at having to figure out a way to pay for $60 to $100 million of capital projects. Those are brand new projects. That's not something that's not operations. That's maintaining the system and expanding the system. So we looked at two scenarios and we labeled them the worst case scenario and the best case scenario. The worst case scenario is Chromium 6 at 60 million, and the best case scenario is Chromium 6 at 20 million. And 20 and 60 million is construction cost, and then there's another about $900,000 for planning costs. That's design, engineering, pilot testing. That's everything that the district will incur before actually building the project. Okay, but
We're just distributing your presentation, which will make it a lot easier for us.
You're still warm.
For color.
okay, we're on page 7. Okay.
7.
Or two.
Figure it all out.
Okay, so on page 7, we have capital projects that over the next decade. And we summarized them by different categories. And you have 12 mainline, fleet, some other things, the admin building, and the Chromium 6. Okay, out of the 60 to 100 million, the 2026 projects are only $3.8 million. So the current fiscal year that we're currently in, we're expecting that will run about 3.8 million. Really, the bulk of the costs will be happening over the next 9 years. Okay, and the difference between the best and the worst case scenario, really the only differential is the Chromium 6. Everything else was kept the same. Okay, next slide, please. And this is what it looks like. Once we take that 60 to 100 million and graph it over the years, over the next decade, that's what the looks like. The red spike, that's the difference between the worst and the best case scenario. So the red spike, the chromium 6 being 60 million, and the green line is the chromium 6 being 20 million. So, but you see that in general, roughly about $5 million a year of different projects besides chromium 6 will be happening. Sometimes it's slightly more, sometimes it's slightly more. Okay, next slide, please. And then we have to look at what resources does the district have to try to tackle all these capital improvements. So you have a very, very robust reserve balance. As of the end of 2026 fiscal year, the current fiscal year, we're expecting the district to end up with about $21 million in cash.
Unrestricted.
No, some of it is restricted.
Oh.
I see. Yes. So, and again, we've taken out anything that's wastewater related and Copper Mountain and Mesa because they are separate funds that we cannot touch for the water system operations. Like this is for the water side of things. So 2026, we're expecting the reserves to be at about $21 million. By the time Chromium 6 project has to be built, you will run down a little bit of reserves. You're expecting to be at about 20.5 million. Okay, but what changes is we have to make a difference between unrestricted and restricted reserves. So unrestricted reserves is the money that you have a lot of discretion over. There's no external restriction that's placed on it. So you might have designated them for capital projects. You might designate them for aid replacement. You might designate them for emergencies. But really, from the legal standpoint, that money is available at any point, at any time for any legal purpose of the district. The restricted funds usually have some form of external restriction on them. And in your case, you have water capacity fees. And those are subject to the California Mitigation Fee Act requirements that they can only be spent on the expansion of the system. They cannot be spent on the maintenance of your existing infrastructure. But because we're looking at figuring out how to fund the CIP, that restricted water capacity fee account is available to help you fund expansion of the system. So that's why we consider them to be a part of the reserves that are available for the project. Okay.
And by project, you're referencing the Chrome 6 project?
The Chrome 6 project, yes. Yeah, because ultimately the goal of this is to figure out how do we pay for Chromium 6. So what we're expecting though, because of the very aggressive capital improvement program that you currently have in front of you, is there's going to be a slight shift over the next couple of years between 26 and 28 in what makes up restricted and unrestricted reserves. So unrestricted reserves are expected to go down from 19.4 million to about 17.1 million. We're looking at losing about 2.2 million of unrestricted reserves because of the capital improvements, other CIP projects that we. At the same time, we made some assumptions about the growth in the community, and you have a couple of projects coming up. And they're likely to generate additional water capacity fees. And we expect by 2028, by the end of 2028, the district would have about 3.4 million in capacity fees that will be available to help fund. Okay, so that's the makeup of the reserves. Right now, we're at about 21 million, more or less the same in a couple of years, slightly less. But there's going to be more in the capacity fee account and slightly less in the unrestricted reserves account. So the next question, and that's the next slide, is really what's the right level of reserves that the district need to maintain? In other words, what money is off the table when it comes to funding Chromium 6 and other capital projects. And there's two different numbers that really you're trying to wrap your head around. One is what's the absolute minimum? And when we say absolute minimum is what's the number below which the district is struggling to operate financially. Okay, because you have working capital needs, you have some emergencies that might come up before any outside funding is available. You have some capital replacement that you need to set aside some money for. So that's the baseline. If you fall below that number, this is the red flag. This is the danger critical. And in your case, looking at operating reserves, capital reserves, emergency capital replacement, some money for capital projects, really the number of about $9 million is your baseline. Going below $9 million in cash reserves really puts the district in a position where you might not be able to meet emergency basic capital and working capital requirements of the running the organization. So kind of the first $9 million of that $20 million that we talked about before is off the table, which is not good. And then really to run an organization for the long term and make sure that you're positioned to handle your normal operations, right? And not have to borrow money for it. $13 million is kind of your sweet spot. Assuming Chromium 6 is not integrated, right? It's done. But running a system of your size, you might have about $13 million in reserves at any point in time, just to be comfortable and not feel the pressure of major things happening and taking that. Okay. So that's the baseline. Right now we have about $21 million in reserves. None of it is absolutely off the table because we need to maintain it. And ideally you want to be at about 30. Okay. So the next slide, this is slide 11, is we're looking at the cash flow, right? And that's where we looked at the blue and the orange line, right? And we said every year you have about $4.5 to $5 million to help you fund capital improvement. On that graph, the difference between the blue and the orange line is the green line. So the green line is the annual cash flow that's projected. So you take all your revenues, you pay all your expenses, how much do you have left? So that's the green line. We're looking at about $4.5, $5 million a year. Okay, and the blue bars, that's your capital improvement projects that are scheduled for those years. So whenever the blue bars are below the green line, your cash flow positive. All the cash flow that you generated for the year helps you pay for the capital projects, and you're good. Okay. When the blue lines are above the green line, that's where you're taking money out of reserves to help pay for capital projects. Okay. So all of this shows the entire capital improvements program other than the Chromium 6. The Chromium 6 completely out of the picture, and this is everything else other than Chromium. So over the next decade, assuming we pay for everything else on the CIP other than the Chromium 6, we will finish the decade about $4 million more than we currently are at. So right now you're at about 21 million. The decade passed. You've been raising the rates as we discussed. You've been operating as expected. You've paid for all the capital projects. And you have about $25 million in reserves at the end of the decade without taking on any debt. Okay. Like I said, currently $21 million in reserves. 2035, we're expecting about $25 million in reserves. So without Chromium 6, the district is doing really, really well. Okay, but also what it shows is that even in the best case scenario, where Chromium 6 project is only $20 million, only is not to change. The current operations of the district and the 5% a year increases will not help you fund the project. You still need way more outside funding to help fund Chromium 6. Okay, next slide. So, and this is where we start talking about how do we finance a project. And water revenue financing is a baseline of municipal finance in the United States. The water districts can finance capital projects with what's called tax-exempt interest rates. Tax-exempt means that the investors or the banks that are lending you money don't have to pay income taxes on the interest that you're paying them. Okay, that's the United States is the only country in the world that allows tax-exempt financing, and that's specifically to help fund municipal infrastructure. Okay, because what happens is when the investor or a lender is receiving interest income and they don't have to pay taxes on it, they're willing to take much lower interest rates than if they have to pay taxes. So that differential is about 30+%. So that's a very big discount off the market interest rates that public agencies are able to borrow money at. Also, because of how water systems operate, it's not just, you're not dependent on one customer. You have thousands of customers that are paying, a few dollars or $100 a month into the system. So one customer going away, a few customers going away really doesn't change the financial dynamic of the organization. So the investment market is viewing water financing as something that's very, very safe. So water districts generally able to get really advantageous interest rates to fund projects. The way water projects are funded is you take that net revenue, the difference between all the revenues you're generating and your net expenses, and you pledge that net revenue for the repayment of debt. You don't have to pledge data. You don't have to pledge building. You don't have to pledge your system. You only pay the revenue to secure your financing. So that makes it pretty simple. That the pledge of net revenue is highly desirable in the financial market. So water financing is generally very much liked by the investors. What you need to keep in mind when you finance projects is because there is no other collateral, the big threshold that the investors and the lenders are asking for is that you maintain a debt service coverage ratio of at least 1.25. That means every year, all your revenues minus your O&M expenses, right, the net revenue, divided by the debt service that you're paying to the lenders and the investors needs to be at least 1.25. So your net revenue has to be covering your debt payments by at least additional 25%. Okay, if you drop below that, the lenders are not going to be too excited about lending you money. So you need to have some room in your cash flow when you're financing projects to make sure that you're comfortably meeting that 1.25 debt service coverage ratio. Okay, so that's the basics of water financing. And some of these concepts will come into play in the next steps. So we looked at 4 different scenarios, financing scenarios. And again, this is just planning. We're not posing anything. Right now we're testing. If you think about it, this is the range of different outcomes. And we're stress testing what it takes to be at the different level. Okay, so we looked at 4 different financing scenarios. First, we looked at the worst case. The project costs you $60 million. And there's 2 alternatives under that worst case. One is you finance the entire project. And then the other alternative is we actually take about $7.4 million of reserves And that's the reserves that you set aside for the Chromium 6 project, plus your water capacity. Okay? We're not touching any other reserves yet. It's just what specifically the district has already set aside, plus the water capacity. So that's about $7.4 million. So 60 million minus 7.4 to finance that. That's the worst case, the full cost and the net cost scenarios. Right, and then we look at the best case scenario, also under both alternatives. One is $20 million of straightforward financing full cost, or 20 million minus the same reserves, 7.4 million. And in the worst case scenario, we assumed 30% financing term. So that's usually as long as these projects can go out on the financing. And we assumed 5% interest rate. Realistically, we're probably going to be lower. But again, we're stress testing and we're making sure that these are conservative. So if we finance the entire $60 million, the annual payment off of that is roughly 3.9 million. Okay, if we do net cost on the worst case scenario, the payment goes down. So that if we apply the reserves, the payment goes down by about $500,000 a year to 3.4. On the best case scenario, if we do the full cost financing, it's about $1.3 million a year payment, and then net cost is only about $830,000. Okay, so that's the range of different scenarios that we're looking at. Okay, so what this numbers do not include is it does not include any outside grant or earmark funding. Because we wanted to see where do we stand if no one helps the district, no one helps the community who had to pay for the projects. Is the community even able, and to what extent it's able to fund the project? Okay, so anything that we bring in through grants and earmarks, and that's why the trip to Sacramento, the trip to DC is absolutely important, would help to relieve this burden from the community. So next time Sarah comes and says, oh, we have to sign this letter, or we have to sign this application, or let's go to Sacramento. The reason for that is to help reduce this burden. Okay. Next slide, please. So this is some narrative around the numbers that we ran. So the 4 different financing scenarios. So the first one is the worst case scenario, $60 million financing, rate increases of 5%, annual payment, $9 million. In that case, the net revenue drops from 4.5 to 5 million to only about $500,000. So that payment would consume most of your available cash. Okay, and your debt service coverage ratio. Remember, I said you have to maintain the debt service coverage ratio is 1.1, and that's considered to be too low. That's most investors would not be interested in financing a project like that. So, and that means that you cannot pay for any other capital projects. So it's either you take Chromium 6 at full cost and do it, and that will completely crowd out your ability to do any other capital projects. Okay, and even with that, at the end of the decade, you will be in a cash flow deficit of about $18 million, and your total cash balance would be about 2.6 million. And we said that you need at least 9 to just maintain reasonable operation. Okay, so $60 million at 5% rate increases a year would not work. If the annual rate increases are 7%, you're able to hit the 1.25 coverage ratio, but you're still in a cash flow deficit of $100 total. And your cash balance at the end of the decade is just about 12 million. It's not ideal, but you're kind of coming along. So to be cash flow breaks even over the decade, the annual rate increases have to be almost 9%. Okay, so that's the severity of a $60 million scenario. Basically, unless the community is able to continue raising the rates and paying more and more for water service, the $60 million scenario without outside help is not realistic. Okay, then we drop down to scenario 2. That's where we apply the $7.4 million from reserves to the same assumptions. So now your net revenue is about $1 million a year, and you are right at the cusp of the debt service coverage ratio, 1.26, so just enough. We're using the reserves to help pay for the $60 million project. We're kind of squeaking by. You still cannot pay for most of the other capital projects. And you're still in a $50 million capital deficit at the end of the decade. So to be break even, the rate increases would have to be 8.15% a year. Okay, so also not a workable scenario under these assumptions. So now let's look at the best case scenario. So now we're looking at what if the project cost is only $20 million and kind of the same idea, 5% annual rate increases for annual payment of $1.3 million. So your net revenue still drops to about $3.5 million, and you're at 3 times net service coverage ratio. That's very healthy. You can comfortably pay for the Chromium 6 project and all the other capital projects. And at the end of the decade, you're only down about $1.5 million in reserves. Okay, so your total reserves are projected to be right about $20 million. So a $20 million Chromium 6 project with 5% annual rate increases, it actually works. That's doable. And the final scenario is if we apply the $7.4 million reserves and only finance 12.6. I mean, it's really great. 3.6 $4 million a year in surplus. Very healthy for debt service coverage. And you even end up at the end of the decade with something like that. So that's the range of the outcome, right? On the low end, you're doing fine. On the high end, it breaks your back. That Chromium 6 really is a once in a generation project for the district, for the community. And this is the impact of it. If we're able to cut the costs low, it's actually doable. But at the full cost, it will break the community's back. So next slide. So some of the conclusions. And then we can go into this question. So we got Chromium 6, the district is very healthy and can comfortably maintain operations, keep strong reserves, and fund capital outlay with 5% annual rate increase. The Chromium 6 is a once in a generation project, and to pull this off, the entire organization has to remain laser focused on this project to succeed. And we've worked with communities like this in the past, and some of you, when you look back now, I heard you met with San Batista. And that's another one of our clients that we've helped. It's a community of 2,000 people, and they have a $48 million water wastewater project.
Yep.
We have to set aside every other shining idea and focus on solving water and wastewater, and we're almost done with it. But it takes that focus. You have to really focus on that. You maintain your infrastructure. You don't let other things go. But you're not chasing any other shining ideas, and you cannot take any other major projects in addition to things. No matter what the Chromium 6 looks like, whether it's the best case scenario or the worst case scenario, it's impossible to do it without taking on debt, unless we bring in enough rent revenues. Next slide, please. So under the worst case scenario, we cannot fund both capital outlay and Chromium 6 with 5% rate increases. So break even requires 8 to 8.75 annual rate increases. And grants and earmarks are just absolutely essential. Like it's impossible to get that project done without outside funding. In the best case scenario, you can comfortably fund both capital outlay and Chromium 6 with 5% rate increases. Able to maintain healthy debt service coverage ratio and reserves. And to the extent that we're able to get the grants and earmarks, that it will only make situation better. So next slide. Some thoughts of what it takes and what's required to take on gas. When you borrow money, it introduces pressure. Whenever anybody borrows money, whether it's bonds or bank loans, it adds pressure to your operations. And it requires very strong financial management. So rate structure becomes very important because now you have this annual payment that's fixed for the next 30 years. Okay, so what we see in the rate structures, if you're excessively relying on variable component of the rates, if there is a drought and there is a conservation measure in place, or the rates become expensive and people voluntarily start conserving water, all of a sudden it reduces your revenues, where you have a big nut that you have to crack every year. So you want to make sure that your rate structure has a larger fixed component every year, and you're less dependent on the variable revenue based on the demand. Also, we talked about the covenants. 1.25 debt service coverage ratio is your target. So you want to make sure that, because every year it costs you more and more to operate the district. Director Shorty mentioned, prices going up everywhere. The district is paying those prices as well. So you want to make sure that you're keeping every year, you're keeping up with inflation, at least with inflation, to help you keep that debt service coverage ratio. Things go really wrong, even though you continue making payments to a bank, but you blow the coverage count, you actually are required to implement measures in place to adjust the rates. Okay, at that point, it's no longer an option. It's a covenant within the financing documents. Otherwise, the investors have a right to demand immediately the full repayment of their debt. Okay. And your reserves provide cushion and flexibility. So when you have good reserves, taking on debt becomes much more comfortable than when you run out of reserves, you have to do emergency borrow. And the final slide is some of the questions to ask at the organization level, of policy level. What is your appropriate level of reserve? The lower reserves level might be okay after Chromium 6 project is done. We looked at it. We've been talking about 5%. 5% is kind of the magic number, and everything's like really nice and easy. But once Chromium 6 is addressed, assuming there is no other major project coming down the pike, you may not meet the full 5% increases once you're done with Chromium 6. Another question to ask is, besides Chromium 6, there is another $30 million worth of work that needs to be done. Is all of it required in the next decade? So if to the extent that some of it can be pushed further without jeopardizing the system condition, right? That's something to consider. And then finally, what future rate increases are appropriate? Because your rate study is done on December 31st of 2027. It comes January 1st, 2028, there is no approved rate increase. So to do everything you have in front of you, you have to continue increasing rates. So the question is, what does the community need to do to address everything that we have in this place? So what numbers? Not all of it is good news, most of it is not. But at least we have the context. With that, I can be questions, discussion.
Thank you so much, Dimitri. Are there any comments or questions from the public here in the boardroom? Consultant Kathleen Radnitz, please.
Well, I don't know if I even qualify as public, but just a question maybe for Andy. The reserves that keep being referred to, the pot of gold, is that where our disaster emergency monies are also held in the unrestricted? Yes. So were we to go with a scenario that really threw a bunch of that in there, and then we have a major disaster, we wouldn't have the capital to immediately operate, correct? So in the worst case, or the lowest scenario, the lowest reserve scenario that we prepared, we would keep $2 million in the emergency capital replacement fund. So we would still have, the majority of what we have, but not the optimal balancing after. Thank you.
All right, nobody online with any questions, so Director Jarlsberg?
Oh, all right.
I saw you raise your hand, didn't I?
Yep.
Okay.
Go back to some of the ideas that came up earlier. And it's been referred to, and we've been talking about this over the last few years too. Less water due to conservation leads to less income, and we're going to be asking them for more income for less water. And how do we sell that nut? And we do have a number of developments that want to come in, and maybe we're gonna have to give into that in order to get more funds. It's just not happy about even thinking about that, but I'm not anti-development. I'm pro good, development that takes into consideration our actual unique community, and also that it would help people who are really low income. The average income is low income actually. And there's probably other, a certain percentage that are below poverty level. I'm a person that lives on Social Security, except when I do some volunteer stuff that gets reimbursed, and I'm not going to be able to do that the rest of my life. So I'm really thinking into the future also, as to how I'm going to afford all this.
Before you continue to answer on the development side.
Yeah.
The development assumptions we've made in the model is historically you've been averaging about 20-25 homes a year. So we've continued that number. Plus there's a couple of big projects that you mentioned.
Yeah, it's not just homes.
Yes.
It's hotels and restaurants.
So you factored that in?
Factored in the three projects that are forthcoming, that are known projects potentially.
Yeah. But there's more coming, obviously. The county wants them, whether we do or not. So, the other thing is somewhere in your, the first part of your presentation, you mentioned something about the rate. You ended it saying that the rate increase would be, I think it was 7% or something, but at some point you said increase rate in January 2027 would be 9.3%.
Right, 9.3 is what's approved in your rate study.
Okay.
Existing rate study.
Yeah,
So that's what would be the last increase before we have a new tax rate, a new
Rate study.
yeah, rate study. Okay. I just wasn't sure where that fit in. And then we're talking about the Chromium 6 project, like it's all done at some point. But we've got maintenance that we were told was going to be at least $1 million a year. Is that included in that 60,000?
No, that's
60 million.
That's included in your operating expenses. That's already in the model.
It's in the model.
Okay, I didn't really see anything increased at that level in the list that you made.
If we can look at the slide 6, please. So when the orange line is the expenses, we see the orange line going up every year. the increase for the operating expenses related to Chromium 6 is in that orange one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And it's still about $1 million a year?
$750 a year with 5% annual increases.
Oh,
Anticipated.
okay.
So we still have more to learn. Pilot study will help us with that.
Yeah.
And that does not include any staffing. Staffing is separately in the labor part of the cost.
The other question, and then I'll be done, is that we still have some capital projects that, Belmont, for instance, that haven't been able to be finished for a variety of reasons. Is that all factored into? Because you said that we can't do any more capital.
Well, so that's the next slide. The total projects are 60 million to 100 million. Chromium 6 is only 20 to 60 of it. The other 40 million, that's everything else. So that's when we talk about the cash flow and everything else, that's included in those numbers.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
So Chromium 6 is just at the high level. It's essentially you either do Chromium 6 and you don't do anything else, or you do everything else.
Well, we don't bring anything new in, but we've got some projects that need to be finished.
Capital projects to keep our infrastructure running need to also be addressed, like, our well rehab that we just did, or our tank rehabs or pipelines.
Sure.
The new projects or anything that's in addition to that would be challenging at this time, cost wise and resource wise.
But we're done with the upgrades of the meters, for instance, right? At least at the moment, until we get new development or.
Well, meters have a lifespan as well, so
Yes,
yeah, we'll have
exactly.
money for that in the future.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Director Fick?
Yes. Your VP just.
Okay, Vice President Short?
Okay, so back in 2023, we had a rate study, and the high mark on that one was what, 15% rate increases annually on scenario A?
Oh, the highest?
Yes.
I know what we implemented was the 9%.
Yeah.
The highest scenario.
It was high the first year and then each year went down.
Yeah, it would go down a bit, but
Yeah.
it's not that important. But anyways, so we were told that was vital to acquiring or having rates that high, but we survived on the 9% increase. We're doing fine. So forgive me if I'm a bit skeptical on the numbers here. I think on the idea that once Chromium is done, these rates are going to balance out. I think that's naive at best, honestly. Just in this meeting, we've talked about PFAS, we've talked about nitrates. These unfunded mandates are going to keep coming. I think Chromium is probably just the start. There's going to be other things that come up, and the idea that we're even saying this and giving this information out to the public, it doesn't make sense to me, because I don't think it's reliable information. What else? Another thing that we need to take into consideration, we say that we need to raise the rates to keep up with inflation. What's not keeping up with inflation is wages, Social Security, and VA disability. These are things that people need. This is how they rely on to feed their families, and we're gonna be taking away from that. So when we do this, we could be pricing people out of the area, flat out. It's going to be almost 100 degrees this week. This is just going to get worse. People are going to need more and more water. As next year is going to be even worse. It's going to be even hotter next year. This isn't stopping. So if we keep increasing the rates, people are going to start leaving this area. That's just a matter of fact. We've already seen it in the census. It's dropped. The population here is dropping. Was that taken into consideration?
I'm a finance nerd.
I get that.
I think in the got mail movie, there was a quote.
Mm-hmm.
you have cash registers instead of a heart. So when I work on projects, I have to take that approach because hope is not a strategy.
Yeah.
And one thing that never works out is when one organization is trying to save the entirety of its community by trying to shoulder the burden of affordability. Prices are going up everywhere. You have major capital projects you have to take on.
Yeah.
We've seen communities that try to ignore the reality of increasing costs, and that rarely ends well. So as much as we want to have a part, as much as we want to not price people out, you are just a small line item in your budget. Right? So, and your responsibility is to make sure that those people actually have good drinking water. So as much as you want to try to help, you have to balance it out so that you don't take down the organization. So some rate increases will be necessary regardless of what kind of how much you care for that, right? Because at some point it will be the survival of the organization versus trying to save a few bucks for it.
Yeah. No, I understand that. I'm saying this in terms of our baseline as well. If we're basing these numbers off these assumptions and these assumptions are flawed, how good is that baseline?
So again, we're not trying to run a model that is aggressive. We're trying to run a model that will help the agency have the context to make correct decisions. Because hope is not a strategy. When it comes to finance and paying for infrastructure, hope is not a strategy. So you have to have a realistic understanding of what you have to work with to understand the option. We're not advocating any course of action. We're not saying that you should be raising rates by X or Y. We're saying that given everything that you have on your plate, and given assumptions that the organization is running efficiently and well managed, this is what the financial picture looks like. Right? I'm sure to the extent that you have a vacancy, you'll save some money. But at some point, you start paying out that money because you have to pay overtime. So some of those savings might go away. Also, what we've seen is recently wages have been going up more than the general inflation. And catching up with what's happening to prices. When you run an organization and all of a sudden, the 3% salary increase doesn't cut it anymore because we can't find applicants who are willing to take that pay, you have to give a higher pay increase. So maybe we're assuming full staffing, but we're also assuming kind of baseline inflation. So where things start diverging, being more conservative on the staffing assumption gives you the cushion to react to some other shock that is not in the model. So maybe I wouldn't say we're aggressive on the cost assumptions. I would say we're really realistic. And what we've seen in these types of models is 3-4 years into the future, the models are still tracking very much reality. So you'll save some money in certain areas, but you'll spend a little bit more in other areas, and that kind of plays out. That's why our planning process was so intense, and we had to go line by line to try to make decisions on different factors that are inputs into the model to make sure that they're as close to reality. Because reality will be different, but if you've done the due diligence to address different line items, and make good decisions about those line items, you reduce the variability of the outcomes. So that was our approach. I would be very curious to see 3-4 years down the road where this forecast compares to reality.
Yeah.
But in the past, what we've seen is it tracks reasonably well. forecasting future is hard.
Yeah,
So
no,
it's,
yeah.
but no attempt was made here to be super aggressive and make assumptions that the district is, you will need all this money because of this bad things are happening. We try to be very kind of baseline driven and realistic in the calculations.
Yes.
So I had a few comments. One in regard to the fact that the rate study, you're right, the scenario A was 16, 14, 12, 10, 8%. The reason that the 9% worked out, or part of the reason, a big part of the reason, is because we have been underspending the last several years. We've had lack of staffing, we've had paused programs, so that really helped balance that out. In addition, I wanted to mention, again, we have to look back to Prop 218, which says that the rates have to reflect the cost of service, and we'll have a rate study once we know more. We'll have a full-on rate study that will dial all this in. But that's why it's really important for us to obtain as many grants and earmarks and, free money. It, comes with a lot of effort, but it's going to be really important to obtain as much of that funding as possible to offset these costs.
That's all.
All right. Director Fick?
Yes, several questions. One, I remember about 5 or 6 months ago, our high water mark with the reserves was around 25 million. And then we cut into it by 2 million. Or what is our current reserve right now?
So it is in about the 26 million range. We wastewater capacity charges that were not taken into consideration for this study because those are restricted for other purposes. Those are restricted for a wastewater treatment facility. Sorry, are you going to say so? Oh, sorry. We have the CMM reserves, so the 3 CMM reserves that were not included in the study because those are not available funds. We have consumer and project deposit reserve that is not included, so that makes up the difference between the 21 million and the 26 that we have.
Okay, that answers that. Also, not that it's a major income part, but our property tax cut is probably going to go down a little because real estate values in Joshua Tree have gone down, stagnated or gone down a little in the last 2 years. So I guess that's going to be a couple $100,000 that we lose in that sense.
Most likely, yeah. We did look at a projection from the county about property taxes, so we try to follow in line with that. But, again, it's projecting the future and predicting the future, so it could go the other direction.
Speaking of the county, you guys mentioned 3 projects. What are those projects?
We have Lovemore,
Santorini, and One Tree Hill.
Oh, not the yacht club?
Yeah, One Tree Hill's not done.
What about the yacht club?
We didn't have enough information on the yacht club to.
Oh, okay.
And okay, so
They're assumptions, though, and they may not come to
yeah,
fruition.
I know Lovemore's in litigation and it's going to lose. I know that. So in the situation of what's called the One Tree Hill, that's the hidden project that's called Joshua Tree Resort, which the county will not admit to having. By the way, they're going to have a hearing to rezone it illegally on the 24th, coming up Tuesday. It's a piecemeal thing that they're trying to do, and it's questionable. Now, Santorini, that one, because they're subdividing it without an HOA, is pretty much just 82.5 acre properties. So that's just another 80 houses. I don't know how these. Yeah, it's 80 acres divided in and stuff. But they're doing it pretty half-assed because they're doing it not as one unit, but they're doing it as separate parcels, and they can't command those parcels to build their 2-story blue tile white buildings. So they don't understand that. So
We haven't heard, where that's going to go through. So again, it's like crystal ball, not
Well,
do our best with.
I looked them up. They're a UPS office in San Fernando Valley, so it's kind of weird. So, okay. Now, my biggest question is, in the worst case scenario and the best case scenario, what's the biggest variable in that?
Well, staff is working very hard, as we discussed in the previous session, on narrowing down the treatment options, and we are doing our best to bring those costs down where we can. We are very hopeful for grant funding and any community project funding. So those are all of the contributing factors that we're hoping to, get that number down.
Okay, so that would be the best case scenario would be getting monies out there, grants and really, really good loans and things like that. Okay. Because it sounds like the actual logistics of the treatment system is sort of set.
Well, we have some costs that we're working on, and when we know more, we're going to bring it, to the board for your review, but we're hopeful to get those costs down.
Okay, thank you.
Director Sloan?
Director Sloan?
Just a casual observation. I bought gasoline in 29 Palms premium for my truck, and it was $6.10 a gallon. Occasionally I hear something about how we like to have revenue or money, we'll say money, in such a supply that we could run this place for 6 months in an emergency. Has that factored into all of this about reserves and such?
Yes, so we have our, here are minimum and optimal reserve targets. So we kept the operating revenue the same, which would have 3 months of operating revenues available. The cash flow reserve, that one in the optimal model is the same with 3 months of operating reserves included. In the minimum model, it comes out to 2 months of reserves, of operating reserves. So we would have either 5 between the two, 5 months or 6 months, depending on which model we're looking at. But we're really not, I mean, on the surface, we're not hoping, I think, to dip into those reserves. Those are the primary reserves. Those would be the last ones that we would touch. In my, opinion, my recommendation that operating reserve and cash flow reserve would need to be maintained as much as possible.
I kind of, one of my biggest concerns is the potential for emergencies such as an earthquake. Bearing in mind that FEMA is a reimbursing agency, it's not a funding agency. And I'm starting to see reports now that FEMA is in terrible condition right now in terms of their staffing, their senior people are disappearing and all of that. And so there's, to be reimbursed now, it's years, 2-3 years to be reimbursed by. I'm kind of concerned about, in the last earthquake, it cost us $1 million just, I think, for one tank, something like that. I forgot. But that
I can address in this model for our reserve targets, the minimum would remain 2 million. The maximum or the optimal would be 3 million for the emergency capital reserve. And we're also looking into supplemental earthquake insurance, which we'll be bringing to the board once we have enough information about that as another alternative to supplement these reserves.
I'm very pleased to hear that we've been, up until Probe 6 happened, we've been doing very well financially in terms of managing the costs and the revenue and all that kind of stuff. I heard just briefly a while back, it was made mention, I think by the general manager, that there could be a strategy where we're not necessarily borrowing or bonding. Say the pessimistic number, 60 million all at once, that could potentially be done incrementally. Is that a possibility? And if it is what would the response time be? Say if we we borrowed 20 million. And then when we were running out of that, we would borrow another 20 million. Is there like a time issue there? Is it predictable that the funding would continuously be flowing, or would we have to borrow the 60 million all at once, which if we did, we would be getting interest income on that, I assume, somehow?
I think that would be a good question for Dimitri.
Right, so when we started working on the strategy, that's when those questions will be answered. Right now, we did not go to that level of detail because that requires knowing exactly how we're going to build a project, right? And then what other funding sources we're able to obtain.
Yeah.
So if you get grant funding, it's exactly what the project looks like and what it takes to build it, then we'll look at phasing. I'll look for that. But right now, that has not been a focus of the discussion. This has been really understand what do we have to work with in terms of cash flow and reserves.
All right, I have a few things, President Doolittle here. Okay, so that's what I waited. Is what we are piloting the 20 million or the $60 million solution? Has that question been asked? Is that a correct question? Okay.
Yeah, so we're piloting the technology that will really determine the media that will need to be done and confirm the vessel sizes. The vessel sizes probably won't change that much. It really is looking at the media, what kind of media they will use and prove out that it will work so that we can present that to PDW. I think where the big costs, the real big cost implications, and just to give some background on it, the $60 million was put forth within the Jacobs study that we helped on. And it includes a lot of assumptions that were built into that from a cost perspective. So when you don't know a whole lot about a project, you have to make different assumptions. And at the level that they made them, right, the project definition was pretty broad. So Ray, Sarah, and I have been going through those assumptions and looked at, okay, what are the vendors that we're really looking at? What are some of the costs that they're coming with us? Our next steps are going to be through the pilot study. We'll be evaluating, okay, well, what is the construction cost of implementing these at the different sites and what features are we going to need? So I think we're just going to be bringing in more detail into those cost estimates, more definition into the project. And as we do that, we narrow the assumptions that need to be made. And through that process, we'll kind of identify what are we really targeting. So a great example in the Jacobs cost estimate itself, it had a 30% markup for scope contingency on things that they were unaware of, that they couldn't be aware of at that time. So, you know, that could be a big piece of what we find, right? They had assumptions because of this technology has some head losses through the system or pressure losses through the system. They had assumptions that we would need booster pump stations at the end of these to get it back to our tanks and reservoirs. We're going to look closely at that. We're going to evaluate if that's really the case, or there's some minor modifications we can make on the existing well pumps to overcome some of those head losses and maybe turn, you know, $500,000 or $1 million into $50,000 of upgrade. So our project definition over the next 6 months or so and through the piloting is really going to fine tune some of those cost estimates. I mean, Ray and I's gut reaction was it's a little too conservative for our liking, but we understand why they did it, right? You never want to give a client a cost and then it comes out 2 times higher, right? But then you basically you shot yourself in the head, not the foot.
In the headwater.
Yeah. But we need to give Dimitri something, right? Because we knew 60 was gonna be a lot. I think some of the initial discussions were, that this is very impactful. So the 20 is kind of a real big swag, you know, on, wow, this could be something that we might be able to deliver or somewhere around it. So let's throw that out there just so that we see what the financial impacts could be. So I know that was really long-winded. We're working on that project definition to really try and refine what those cost elements will be and what the project will be.
That was very helpful. So I wanted to clarify, it's not 20 million or 60 million that we're presenting to you for treatment. It's a spectrum, and we will bring those numbers back when we have them more dialed in.
Okay. All right. Well, so I appreciate this being done, Dimitri. Thank you so much. And my appreciation to the general manager for being smart enough to bring on these teams to assist the district. And
President Elu,
oh, yeah.
could I just do one little comment?
Yes, Director Osberg.
I'm just curious about as the pilot project goes along, how often the board will be updated. Will it be incidental or will it be on a, like every month or?
I think, it takes a while for the pilot study to be completed because it's, you're talking parts per billion.
Right.
So it takes a long time. We can certainly give updates as we're, piloting.
I think it might be good to
give
do
you where you're
that.
at. Obviously it's important that the end result, might not be too exciting.
It'd be nice to not be exciting, actually.
We can certainly give you information. We can certainly give.
I just think maybe
It
on
probably
a,
will not be monthly because there's not going to be enough information.
well, I
to
thought you
share.
said it was only gonna take 3 months or something.
Correct, but you usually don't see too much change in the first couple. You're really
Okay.
seeing at the end where it starts to, they call it the curve.
Okay, but you were just talking about the process of developing it as you go along too. I was just thinking it's,
The overall project definition.
yeah,
Yeah, I think
that you're still discussing that and it could be changed from time to time.
I think it's just gonna be, and please correct me if you guys feel different. There's 5 sites. Each site is very different. The pilot study itself is very, very geared toward the technology and the resin, right? So what resin works the best, and that once they've kind of defined that, they kind of adjust some of their numbers. There might be some slight changes in the tank sizes or things, but those are going to be pretty set. We're going to have to work with the manufacturers of the vessels and really identify what features do we want and what requirements are there. And then we have to take that to each site. We have to see, that truck's got to pull up and it's got to do its full regeneration process. So we're gonna have to see what changes are going to need to be made at the sites. We're also going to need to understand what equipment or site changes are going to need to happen to handle those equipment, right? Think about concrete foundations that they sit on and different things like that. So it'll be a process working with them to develop the site plans and the construction items that will be needed, how much grading will be needed, how much concrete, all of those things, as well as the equipment, really understanding, some big assumptions for this are going to be how much would a contractor be marking up the purchase of this equipment, or is the district going to buy some of this equipment and provide it? So all those little factors of procurement are going to work into the overall cost estimate. And then if we were to receive any grant funding or loans that have the VABA requirements, the Buy America, Build America requirements on it, they have their own set of rules and regulations that we'll have to tie into the procurement documents. So it's gonna be a process. I think there's a couple ways to attack the procurement, and we've been talking internally about those and laying those options out. And each one of them has benefits and
drawbacks. So,
We will find a way to update the board on an interval that makes the most sense. There's gonna be a lot of
Perfect.
variables that we'll be working with, but we will find a way to bring this up.
Imagine some of the progress will be kind of subtle too, which would not really interest us. But, you know, if you decide to go to China instead of America or something, you know, I'm
Yeah.
curious about that. Yeah.
All right, so just a few other things I have to say and I want to share is one thing that the 9.3% rate increase this coming year was approved by the board expressly for Chromium 6. I wanted to say that. And I wanted to ask these numbers for these rate increases, does that include any basic fee increases, those numbers?
Yeah, I think it would be across the board.
It's all rolled into that. So,
Yes, it would
okay.
be the overall.
So there's, okay, because I really cannot sit here and agree to these basic fee increases. We got to figure that out. So I would wish it had been a little more explicit in this so I could have seen how much it was.
so just to clarify, we did not make any judgment on the rate structure.
Okay.
It's just the overall amount of revenue that you're bringing in.
So it didn't change. The basic fee then didn't change, right?
No, look, we just said you have to be increasing your.
Oh, I see.
your
Okay.
total rate revenue by 5%.
However you get there, however you get there.
That's the
okay.
next question.
All right, okay.
Dimitri mentioned that the structure is more desirable to increase the fixed rates when you have a large loan like this, keep the heavier weight on the fixed rates and less on the variable rates, but that's a consideration that we'll make when we get to the rate study.
Yeah, I understand the need for it. I understand it. Yeah, just don't like it.
Mhm.
All right, so, and I understand this document is organic and will be shaped by the board because I did speak with General Manager Johnson about this. And the concern that I expressed to her when we were just meeting president to general manager was that this doesn't address wastewater treatment. And I wrote no over here. So, I appreciate the load that the district is under, but we have a responsibility not only to the here and now, but to the future and to govern accordingly. And that's what we're doing by looking at the future. And so the board provides the vision, and that's articulated through the strategic plan. And in our strategic plan that we worked on so hard last year, wastewater is in at least twice, because she and I looked at the strategic plan. I haven't gone back and looked at it. And wastewater should have been part of this financial roadmap. Now, I'm not saying at least wastewater strategy should have been part of it.
That'd be a whole different, and maybe you want to speak to that, but wastewater would not be a part of water. It's separate fund, separate general fund for wastewater. So that would be a whole separate rate study. It would not come out of the water funds.
Okay, yeah, just looking at this, it just said, no. I didn't understand that there was a possibility of that. So I think we really need the wastewater strategy for this. And, I think we need it because otherwise we have no footing. Literally, it's been 6 years that I've been asking about the study, and I'm not blaming anyone, but the DUDAC draft that nobody likes is ossifying online. And and we need this because we don't have the footing or plans to counter county inroads into, mucking with our water and starting to manage JT water at one level. So we have an obligation, I agree, to our ratepayers, especially our disadvantaged population, because that's also going to increase what they're paying related to wastewater. Thank you for that. I want to say, though, I have faith that the district's going to be able to do this. You know what I mean? You guys have worked really hard. And so, and we're lucky to have the team that we have facing this. And I feel a lot of comfort and relaxation about this, even though I know it's a lot of numbers and it's a heavy lift. I know that the district's going to do this. And then I was just commenting on page 18 where Dimitri said, CR6 is a once-in-a-generation project, must remain laser focused, that was in red, to succeed, no distractions allowed. And so kind of what Director Flowen said, I put, so no earthquakes. You tell them, Dimitri. All right, so any other comments from the board? Director Flowen?
Just on an optimistic note. The point, I think, of having, if I understand this, a facility for removing the Chrome 6 at each of the 5 wells, instead of having a central one, is that we are not going to spend a lot of time and money laying pipe to do that. Substantially, these new facilities are going to be on sites that we already have established. Does that make sense?
That does make sense.
Okay, good. Thank you.
And, you know, I believe I forgot to call for any public comments from anyone. So, yes, right, the CAC Chairman, David Rio, do you have something?
You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think our rates this year, going through this year, had anything to do with the Chromium 6. Anything to do with Chromium 6. You're working with something.
There were some considerations of chromium in the 22-23 rate study. There was an assumption that there would be about $8 million in loans and $750,000 a year in operating costs. But that is the extent of it, and we're obviously looking at.
So we didn't have this in sight yet, but it was insightful that we actually did.
Yes, we started to build up towards that goal.
That's good. And I'd just like to say that I thank all you guys for being here and doing. Partially because we have good water to begin with. And for it to be so low and for it not to be backed by any kind of science, we're just trying to keep up with what they're saying, you know, and that's been put on us. Not that we asked for it, not that our water really costs. But this is definitely necessary and frustrating at the same time. It really is. And with prices going up and stuff, yeah, people are probably going to leave, and that means less water being purchased. So it's like it's a hard place to be. So I thank every one of you for putting your time into this, and I pray it just goes away. No, we don't do this, and this is all for naught. It would be awesome. But thanks for your help.
All right, so seeing no further discussion, we will conclude this workshop. And again, thanks to our consultants, Kyle and Dimitri, for being here. And we'll now move back into our regular board meeting. So continuing from item 8 on the action calendar are director reports and comments. This time is reserved for director reports and comments on matters within the district's jurisdictions for informational purposes only. On subjects not covered by the agenda, please note that the opinions expressed by individual directors do not necessarily reflect those of the board as a whole or district staff, and no immediate action shall be taken. And as president, I'd like to acknowledge that there's a lot going on in the community, such as, you know, the highway patrol's been stopping speeders on Highway 62 in town. I appreciate that. It's hotter than usual, and the wildflowers are
Oh, can't talk about Landers, is that it?
I always wondered why we talked about Landers, actually, because it's not in our jurisdiction.
Yeah, all right, I won't.
Is that all from you?
That's it.
All right, Director Fick?
Okay, being that I'm a graduate of the most notorious art school in the world, CalArts, it gives me a thought on thinking out of the box. Now, we probably should put a well just to the east of La Contenta, because the High Desert Water District has a reclamation project there. They're having a mounting problem with water. When they recharge the water, the already treated water goes down, and that's water to be taken on east of La Contenta. That's in our district. And we could just put a well there, pump it to our recharge basins, and we have non-chromium 6 water. That's thinking outside the box, and that's maybe a little too hopeful. Okay. Also, yeah, the Sacramento trip that we just took, it looks hopeful. We had a grand time. It was very smooth. And I have learned to deal with politicians on an issue-by-issue basis.
Thank you.
Yes. So as people know, I'm quite progressive and a Bernie Crat and all that kind of stuff. But I'm also very logical and practical in what we do. And we had very smooth meetings at this in Sacramento. And fortunately, the three women involved in this were the main speakers. They were bookended by two Davids, me and David Carrillo. And we talked a little, not a lot. The foremost talkers were both our president, Doolittle, and our general manager. And they were the best front that we had. And of course, our lobbyists made all the arrangements for this situation. It went very smooth, and I'm quite happy with what happened. And it was kind of mousy in all this. So thank you.
All right, Vice President.
I didn't attend any other additional meetings during this time, but I did want to just speak freely for a minute about this. I understand the frustration in the community when it comes to this project. We have 70-year-old pipes in the ground, and we are talking about building a $60 million chromium facility. So yeah, that's a bit frustrating to deal with from here, but I hope that the community sees that we are not just standing idly by waiting for impact. This is why we went on this DC trip. This is why we went to Sacramento, is to make these connections and these relationships. And for me personally, I know in 2023, I was big on sticking with the 9% increase. And I asked the district to leave no stone unturned. So me personally, this is why I went on that DC trip. I can't ask the district to leave no stone unturned while not doing anything myself. So the board is getting involved. We are active in finding solutions to this. The district is, the staff here is as well. And I hope that the community sees this and that they know that we are working hard to tackle this issue. That's all for me.
Director Flowen.
Yeah, the Landers meeting, its relevance is going to vary, in particular because sometimes Marina West is there to report on Mojave Water Agency stuff and also some local things. But in this case, she was not there. She was absent from this last meeting, but we were there. And also there, you don't know about efficiency in some of these kinds of things. Sometimes it's very productive and sometimes it's not.
And let me say that directors can say whatever they want in their comments. So I'm not here to gate them. I'm just here to remind you to, keep it under the jurisdiction. So
Yeah,
pardon me for
but I
just
think it's
repeating that.
worthy to discuss some of these, the reasons why we think what we think. I was also out at the Copper Mountain Mesa on Saturday. Kathleen allowed me to go. Dismissed me for the hour and a half or so. And I updated them on this chromium-6 stuff and what some of the potential costs might be, and also on the trip to Washington, D.C. Regarding the Washington, D.C. thing, I really do want to thank the general manager and also Director Short for shepherding me throughout that experience. I am an elderly person who is not a traveler. I'm a recluse, and navigating in that town or navigating in airport environments where they cancel or reroute planes and layovers. And I mean, my God, even our former president was, Joe Biden was stuck in Phoenix. As a matter of fact, he was, I was impressed to see all those Secret Service agents surrounding him there. But I think overall I was absent for a meeting because I was sick. But so I'm saying this stuff now. The DC thing, it was definitely worthwhile. And as Sarah has said on some occasions, you're not going to get the money if you don't ask for it. And that I think holds true. And so I do think it was worthwhile that we went there, despite my discomforts. But it's you gotta throw your hook and your bait in the water to catch a fish, and that's what we did. Thanks for the time.
All right, President Doolittle, here's my report. It was a pleasure representing JBWD in Sacramento last week and meeting directly with state leaders. It's always encouraging to see democracy at work in the greatest state in the union, California. Both legislators that we spoke directly with, Assemblymember Greg Wallace and Senator Rosalicia Ochoa-Bow, and their staffs showed great interest in our rural water district and the unique challenges facing our community with the unfunded mandate from the state. These meetings go quickly, given how busy these officials are, and it's almost impossible for me to even take notes. But I did capture Assemblymember Wallace's comment on unfunded mandates when he said it is fundamentally wrong for the state to place these burdens on water districts with these unfunded mandates. And he understood them to be financially crippling. So it kind of goes with our last workshop topic. But here's some good news. He agreed to write a budget letter, which means he is asking the state budget writers, the Department of Finance and the legislative budget committees to fund something or to flag an issue, which makes it part of the official budget conversation. It's not just a meeting comment that disappears in the swirl of government. And what do you know, Senator Rosalicia Ochoa-Bow, when we met with her in the afternoon, she agreed to sign on to the letter, making it bicameral. And that signals with both Assembly and Senate support. And so that signals this isn't just one office asking. There's a broader legislative backing, and JBW's issue will be carried forward. And we did meet with another legislator, his staff, and they indicated some interest in that budget letter, but I'm not sure. And as has been said, our general manager was an ace in these meetings. I don't believe we could ask for a more earnest, capable, or wise representative of the district. She was right there, just had everything covered. So lots of times I had to complain she didn't leave me anything to say because she knew it all. And so the only other thing I have is I attended the day-long Association of California Water Agency Spring Policy Committee on the 13th. It was a day-long doozy with some repetition. It was on Zoom. And just one thing, I had some other things, but I'll just say this, that on March 5th, the Bureau of Reclamation published a new funding opportunity to support water management by supporting projects that improve water use efficiency, increase water conservation, and help communities better manage water resources. And these are Water Smart Small Scale Water Efficiency Grants. You guys already know about it. For small water efficiency improvements, it's $153.4 million grants. And I hope that the general manager isn't going to tell me that we don't have any dog in that hunt.
Tell you that we met with some of the top.
Oh, great. All right. Okay, so that's all for me. And all right, so let's move on to agenda item number 9, which is the general manager's report, which is for informational purposes only on subjects not covered by the agenda. No action to be taken. Please, if any director has a comment during this report, make a note of it and hold it until the end.
So wrapping up the Washington, D.C. and Sacramento trips, they were, I think, very fruitful. We were heard by our legislators and starting to see that they really did hear us, and we'll have more to report the next meeting, hopefully, with some of the work that they might be doing on our behalf. I did meet with Ann, and Dimitri helped set this up with M&S Engineering. Yep. And they have a grant writing component to their firm. They're going to provide us a proposal, and the gentleman we met with also brought up the Bureau of Reclamation grant. And we thought that might be a good option for us. They do have that potential Build American, Buy American clause in there. The top award amount, I believe, is 1.5 per project. So that would be the most that grant would be able to offer us. But we are hopefully going to have a dog in the hunt in that arena. There's a matching component as well. So when we know more, we'll definitely bring that. Well 15 is back online, back to system this week. All the samplings came through clear. We have a little issue with DPW issuing the violation and then a citation on that well because it was not sampled last year at its normal sampling time in September. We're fighting that with them because there was no motor and it was valved off the system, and they were very well aware of it. We kept them in the know the whole time it was offline. And unless you throw a bucket down a well, I'm not really certain how you get water out. But the caveat in that is that we would have to send out that notice to all of our ratepayers that we have this citation potentially, letting them know that we did not sample on time, and they may have been served water from that well. That is not true, and that's the state's wording as served. And so we're fighting that because we did not serve water from that well. And the sampling has thus been done since it's been back to line. So anyway, it's one of those areas in policy that doesn't make sense. And so we're trying to fight that battle, but I wanted to make you aware that, that's, we're going to be facing that, which is unfortunate with all the drumstick stuff. Yet one more issue to deal with, but it's not because we don't sample, we sample. You guys sign the checks for the sampling that we do on a regular basis. And you can't sample a well when there's no motor on it to pull the water out. You can't serve water out of a well when there's no motor on it to water the system. Beyond that, we've been extra busy. We're going to be extra busy through the end of fiscal year. Lots of projects to wrap up. Very busy board meetings. So we'll make sure we have some snacks the rest of the school so that we can get through some longer meetings than typical. Ray, David, any thoughts?
I really appreciate and respect Vice President Short and President Doolittle both acknowledging the community and the disadvantaged. But I think the purpose was to give us a realistic look at what we can anticipate. And what's hard for me is, we're approachable. We're here in the office, and I haven't seen what gas at the pump at Valero or Circle K is right now. But I don't know how much they take into account their community when they're making those decisions. And it's just, we're presenting the information that God, Dimitri worked very, very hard on all of this stuff. So it's hard for us because we're also empathetic to our community. I served at Copper Mountain College, helping low-income students for 18 years get education. So when they come in and give us a hard time about rates or the basic fee and this and that, it's hard for us to follow. But that's the kind of the reality of the situation. So I just wanted to share that. I appreciate your thoughts on that. Thank you.
I just want to say thank you to Dimitri again for being here. And, I think it's a great presentation. It's a good kickoff to where we're going. And obviously things will be changing and evolving as we get more information.
I guess since you're the financial nerd, I'm the treatment nerd. So I appreciate you listening to me. Sometimes I can go on forever about treatment. Just to echo what we said, regulations make a huge impact on our community. Just know we're trying to.
And just to close out, I know we said it last time, you can't say enough. It takes a village. None of it gets done by one person. And we have a really, really excellent team and a board that we feel like we can, depend on to come to with these challenges. So thank you to the board for the work that you did at legislative level in this last, month and a half. It's been huge. Thank you to Kyle from driving up here. I think this is your second or third time this week to come see us. Dimitri flying here to see us. The efforts have been, I think, worthwhile. Dimitri really dove into these numbers. You got to see the pretty picture, but these assumptions were made on a lot of effort. We had in-depth, long meetings that we dialed into every single line item in our budgets. So thank you for those efforts. And Kyle's become more and more instrumental in all of our capital projects, and appreciate his efforts. And if we can figure out how to get CalPERS to let Ray work here full time, that would be a deal that I thought were excellent today. And I really appreciated the way you can explain these topics that can be very complicated for us non-technical treatment nerds to understand it better. So thank you.
Yeah, yes, that's true. Only just a little bit of follow-up. I agree with you. David Shook, director, but I think that there's the thought that the public owns the water and they don't own the gas. So I think there's a little minor difference there. But I hear you that we hope is not a strategy. And I wrote that down when Dimitri said that. So next is item 10, agenda items requested by the board. All the directors up here may request agenda items, which will be recorded on the future agenda items list located on the first page. We won't take action today on these requested items. Do any directors have anything to add to the future agenda items list?
I would.
Okay, Director Fitt.
I think Joshua Basin Water District should become a voting member of the Joshua Tree Alliance of Business and Culture. It's a $200 investment, and you'll know what the going on in the community. It's sort of like a stand-in for what was a normal Chamber of Commerce. This is a newly formed group, and in fact, our CAC, one of our CAC members is treasurer of it. Yes, Thomas Fielstum.
So JTABC membership is something to be discussed. Any other directors? Well, no, okay. All right, I have one. So I actually have two. One is I'd like to put wastewater strategy on it as an agenda item. And then also just following up with a member of the public who actually showed up and asked us something. I think it would be, polite to consider what he said. And so I'd like for us to look at our policy regarding landscaping. And if we don't have one, then have a discussion about what he was saying, which was, the idea of promoting trees in the face of climate culture to keep things cool here in the desert, as opposed to, other messaging we may be putting out. At least it's worth a discussion. Okay, so the board will now adjourn to closed session to confer with legal counsel regarding existing litigation pursuant to the Brown Act, Government Code Section 54956.9, Subdivision D, Paragraph 1, closed session. And we will return after the closed session. The board has reconvened in open session, and in closed session, the board took no reportable action. Thank you, board members, visitors who are no longer here, and staff. With no further business before the board, is there a motion to adjourn? No move.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Have a good afternoon.
Roll call vote, please, General Manager Johnson.
Sorry.
We don't do that. Okay. All right. This meeting is adjourned at 1:44.